And good morning to you, St. Lucia. For those of you who are on island and those of you in the diaspora tuning in to the National Television Network, I am Lucia Joseph, and we are broadcasting live from the Parliament of St. Lucia. Today is the first sitting for the Parliament this week of 2022. The House of Assembly is meeting today, and the order paper is an extensive one in which a number of matters will be attended to. We have the statements by ministers that will be presented, papers to be laid. The papers would be laid by the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Development and Youth Economy, Honorable Philip J. Pierre. We also have papers that will be laid by the Honorable Minister for Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire. The papers will also be laid by the Minister for Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs, Honorable Moses Jean-Baptiste, and the Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, Honorable Emma Hippolyte, will also be presenting papers before the House. The Minister for Infrastructure, Ports, Transports, Physical Development and Urban Renewal, Honorable Stephenson King, will also be laying papers down, and bills that will be under consideration for the first and second readings today. We have the Public Finance Management Amendment, which is down for the first reading, the International Business Companies Amendment, second reading, the Insurance Amendment, first reading, and the Financial Services Regulatory Authority Amendment of the first reading. The Land and House Tax Amendment is down for the first reading. These bills are going to be presented by Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Development and Youth Economy, and bills by the Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development, Cooperatives and Consumer Affairs, Honorable Emma Hippolyte, will be presented for second reading, the Distribution and Price of Goods Amendment. It is the intention, however, of the Honorable Prime Minister to seek leave of the House to enable the bills to go through all their stages at this sitting. Quite importantly for the population, for the people of St. Lucia, the Honorable Prime Minister will be presenting the motion to the House, and for the House to consider the approval for the draft value added tax amendment, an amendment to the Schedule 3 order, and that Schedule 3 is the amendment to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household items, consumables contained in barrels. And that's for the period commencing the first day of February, which is today, Tuesday, 1st February 2022, and terminating on the 31st day of March 2022. And of course, for St. Lucians, we will know that the barrel concessions really goes a long way, and this is an extension because the barrel concessions would have ended at January. But the government of St. Lucia, given all that has been going on with COVID-19, the financial implications of COVID-19, that decided to extend the barrel concession and taking it through all the way to March. And just to remind you that barrel concession, that the exemptions that is going to apply to items with a total value not exceeding $2,500 for each barrel, it is limited to a maximum of 2 barrels per household, and it must not include electronic items, and it also must not include items for commercial use, or if it is included in the barrels, the exemptions will not apply to those items, the electronic items and items for commercial use. So once again, the House is going to vote on this amendment to extend the concession for barrels. Now we can see that the chamber is filling up, and we have The majority of the members of the House already seated. The Prime Minister is in discussion with the staff of the House of the Parliament of St. Lucia, rather. And we can see the Attorney General also in conversation there. He's in conversation with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Tourism, Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire. We do see seated as well Honorable Dr. Virginia Albert Hoyot and the Minister for Youth, Development and Sports, Honorable Kenson Casme, Minister for Housing, Noble Renewal, Honorable Richard Fentre, Honorable Emma Hippolyte is also seated, and we see that I do believe this Honorable Sean Edwards, they're in conversation with Honorable Jeremiah Norbert, and we see the members of the opposition, the leader of the opposition, Honorable Alan Chastney, who's just made his arrival, and Honorable Bradley Felix, who's also in conversation there with Honorable Jeremiah Norbert. And Honorable Stevenson King is also in the House. So at this point, we are awaiting the entrance of the Speaker of the House. And we can see lots of activity to the entrance there of the chamber, which can only signal that the Honorable Speaker, and he is making his arrival.
Let us pray. Almighty God, by whom alone all kings reign, and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudice, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. And the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
Good morning, members. I have been informed of the absence of the member for Library, who is out on official business. Members would also note on the desk before them a copy of the St. Lucia Constitution Order 1978. This has been resubmitted as those originally submitted and those which have been given to members over the last 3 or 4 parliaments have been an incorrect copy of the St. Lucia Constitution. The Attorney General, the Clerk and Deputy Clerk of Parliament, and the Speaker had been going through the Constitution along with the Cabinet Secretary. It was realized that the five of us actually had the original 1978 copy, whereas members had copies made subsequently by the printery, which somehow incorporated errors, more especially at section 10 and 12 of the Constitutions. These have been corrected, and the copies now in your possession are an exact replica of that which was given to us by the British in 1978. So please treasure this one as it is the original document. With one amendment, of course, the amendment allowing a senator to be below the age of 30, which amendment was passed in 1980. We have also put before you a short guide to the budget process so that all members can be fully apprised of that process, put together by the Office of the Parliament through the efforts of the Clerk of Parliament. I'm happy to report that our post-election seminar, which took place from November 30th to December 2nd, 2021, was a success. Parliamentarians had an informative and interesting dialogue with members from the UK delegation, suggestions as to the way forward were also addressed. The delegation comprised of members from both the House of Lords and the House of Commons. St. Lucia also hosted the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Virtual Conference, which was held on December 7th and 8th, 2021, under the theme, quote, "Strong Women, Strong Region, Economic Empowerment of Women," unquote. The purpose of the conference was to engage all female parliamentarians from across the Caribbean, the Americas, and the Atlantic region in fostering a national caucus of women parliamentarians, which would help them keep up to date on women's statuses and to encourage discriminatory legislation and sustainable mechanisms, especially implementing legislation to enable gender equality. The Caribbean Court of Justice, represented by President Adrian D. Saunders, Associate Justice Dennis Barrow, and the Registrar, visited St. Lucia during the period 19th January to 22nd January 2022. The delegation met with the Acting Governor General, as well as a leadership Honorable Dame Janice Pereira, Chief Justice, the Attorney General, parliamentarians, executive of the Bar Association, other national organizations such as the Trade Union Federation and the Christian Council. There was a great exchange on the role, purpose, and benefits of the CCJ. Allow me to extend belated birthday greetings to the member for Dennery North and the member for Viewfort South. I'm not sure if there's any other person whose birthday intervened between the last sitting and now. Honourable members, I'm also pleased to announce that Member of Parliament identification cards have been made and will be distributed to every Member of Parliament. Sarge, do you have the cards that you can just distribute them to the members? Thank you. Statement from ministers. Minister for Agriculture.
I need the podium. Mr. Speaker, this morning I stand with sincere honor in support of the resounding efforts made by this government within the first 100 days and to share significant achievements as we remain committed in executing all of our duties and responsibilities as parliamentary members. My current presentation as Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries, Food Security and Rural Development in this honorable house today not only implies my absence during the sitting of the house where members presented their achievements, but speaks of my presence in the United Kingdom consulting with key stakeholders. Our consultations were aimed at resecuring threatening markets as we were on the verge of losing them. However, our timely intervention in the UK has facilitated further dialogue to rectify key issues. Mr. Speaker, our interest continues to grow and lies in deepening our partnering arrangements with key stakeholders. The government of St. Lucia, with support from the Caribbean Development Bank, has received funding from the Adaptation Fund to the tune of $9,858,570 towards the cost of building resilience to adaptation to climate change and climate variability. Our goal is to build resilience in the St. Lucia agricultural sector. Our objective, therefore, is to increase resilience of selected rural farm communities so as to increase farm productivity, secure livelihoods, and reduce vulnerability to natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, we have built significant momentum in this project since its launching on September 3rd, 2021. Our farmers and fishers, Mr. Speaker, have received payments in aid of incurred damages caused by Hurricane Elsa. Within the 500 days, our government paid almost 5 million EC dollars to assist with replanting, continued food production, and food security. The completion of the first phase of the 7 crops production program, funded by the Taiwanese government, geared at targeting various farmers to ensure sustainability and crop production rotation, is another of our major achievements. The second phase, which was scheduled to begin in January, is presently ongoing. This achievement, Mr. Speaker, will spill over into creating marketing opportunities for farmers, thereby continuously supplying customers with farm produce. Mr. Speaker, we have given our farmers control by changing the policy decision on government's inclusion on the board of the National Fair Trade Organization. We believe that the farmers are ideal to manage the organization, and so any inclusion by the government in decision-making is deemed contrary to fair trade guidelines. We have also installed new members for the marketing board with specific focus on creating market access for farmers for the sale of fresh produce. We have also made provisions to include St. Lucia on a global framework in the fight against illegal, unregulated fishing and other maritime-related crimes. Mr. Speaker, isn't it not evident that we have heard and listened to our farmers and fishers? We continue to try our best to drive and nurture them into becoming high-performing, business-minded people. Mr. Speaker, our achievement as a ministry continue to unfold. We have engaged the Japanese government and JICA on the countermeasures to deal with the Choiseul Port sedimentation. Much financial support has been given to conduct a study as well as to facilitate 2 dredging exercises on the port. That is, removing silt and other materials from the port entrance. The conclusion of this study will result in recommendations to provide a solution to alleviate the sedimentation issue. On October 15th, Mr. Speaker, we recognize the work and contribution of women in agriculture through the celebration of International Women's Day. In keeping with our achievements, I wish to highlight the title of Eco Goodwill Ambassador that was bestowed upon Ms. Kiflin Carew, founder of a non-profit organization, Helen's Daughters. Mr. Speaker, she is the first person from the Caribbean to have received this award. Our observance of World Food Day on October 16th specifically focused on food security and alleviation of hunger is in keeping with our sustainable development goals. During the celebration of this event, meals were provided to the vulnerable and a farmers market was held at Constitution Park. Mr. Speaker, currently we remain strongly committed to frequently serving and supporting the less fortunate. As it relates to the children of the nation, Mr. Speaker, provisions have been made to them. On September 30th, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Food Security and Rural Development, along with the Food and Agriculture Organization, launched the second phase of the National School Feeding Program. This phase focuses on the use of healthy diets, incorporating fresh local produce into meals prepared by the school canteens. A memorandum of understanding was signed with the Ministry of Education to guide the project implementation. It is anticipated that with uninterrupted schooling, local sales will be improved. Mr. Speaker, the community of Dennery South, which is quite dear to my heart, cannot be forgotten as I speak about my achievements. I have concentrated on ensuring that I continue to maintain a strong presence within my community, although successfully discharging my nationwide responsibilities. Insofar, I have responded similarly to that of my constituency of Dennery South, and have therefore given much attention to meeting their needs. Under the Hurricane Elsa Support Program, a total of 17 individuals received housing assistance, 12 of which were entirely constructed and 5 were repaired. The construction phase of these homes in themselves were quite rewarding, capturing a spirit of togetherness and emotional investment. As Lee Johnson says, and I quote, "The more emotional investments we put in the people around us, the more quality of life and longevity surrounds us," end of quote. Let us all live by this quote, as you are encouraged to continue to perform at your best. Mr. Speaker, I am indeed quite elated to share that we have assisted parents of school-aged children. $500 vouchers were given to 145 parents for school support. We understand the challenges faced by parents, especially during these unprecedented times, and so we will continue to seek additional support for them in the foreseeable future. Mr. Speaker, our organized cleanup campaign must not go unnoticed. This activity helped to build environmental awareness and improve the overall aesthetics of the community while creating a spirit of camaraderie. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, let me reiterate that our 100-day achievements underscore the many recognizable successes that are evident when people come together to create purpose and vision. As we embark on the next 100 days and beyond, we will seize every opportunity to ensure that as a nation, you receive good returns on your investment in our capabilities. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Commerce.
I think so. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for the opportunity to make this statement on what I found as parliamentary representative of Soufrière Font-Saint-Jacques upon attaining this position. Mr. Speaker, firstly, I'll start by thanking the Almighty for giving me the breath of life and for giving me the opportunity to serve Him through serving humanity. For this instance, serving the people of Soufrière Font-Saint-Jacques and by extension, the people of St. Lucia. Through you, Mr. Speaker, I want to ensure the constituents of my continued commitment and dedication to the task and to tell them that I will continue giving them sterling representation in Soufrière and out of Soufrière. By extension, Mr. Speaker, I want again to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for reposing his confidence in me. Mr. Speaker, like my colleague before me, I was not in this honorable house when my colleagues reported on the 100 days. But today I will focus squarely on a few local institutions in my constituency. The Soufrière constituency, Mr. Speaker, is unique in many ways. It is unique in that it has no less than 5 institutions serving it and making a contribution to its socio and economic development, namely the Soufrière Town Council, the Soufrière Regional Development Foundation, the Soufrière Marine Management Authority, the Soufrière Piton Management Authority, and the Font-Saint-Jacques Development Committee that is registered as an NGO. Mr. Speaker, No less than 4 of these institutions report to 4 different ministries. And my task is to develop synergies among all 5 institutions so that together we can transform our beloved Soufrière Foché-Jacques. Today, Mr. Speaker, I will, through you, share with the constituents of Soufrière Foché-Jacques and by extension all of St. Lucia what I have found in one of these institutions, and that is the Soufrière Regional Development Foundation. Why the foundation, Mr. Speaker? Because the foundation manages the assets of the people of Soufrière Foché-Jacques, namely the sulfur springs, the pitons, the harbor. Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign, the people of Soufrière Foché-Jacques were united in their cry for a review of the Soufrière Foundation. They gave me a commitment that if I believe I could make changes to that foundation, they will elect me as their parliamentary representative. And Mr. Speaker, they did just that. So I want to report that I have taken this task very seriously, and today I will, in part, not in whole, report on what I have found thus far. Mr. Speaker, the newly installed board of the Soufrière Foundation found that the Soufrière Foundation had lost its credibility and its respect in the community. In short, the foundation was in financial crisis. 1, the workforce was demoralized. And we found, Mr. Speaker, that the foundation had over 200 staff members. A large portion of these members were appointed a few months before the last election, Mr. Speaker. That is what we found. Mr. Speaker, the business sector stopped the line of credit to the Soufrière Foundation. Payables had gone through the roof and stood at $1.2 million as at July 2021. Even to the point where basic services like telephone had to be disconnected. Mr. Speaker, payment to the national insurance to the tune of $87,000 had not been met. And what does that mean, Mr. Speaker? Staff members and their leave claims were in jeopardy. Mr. Speaker, PAYE had not been remitted to the government of St. Lucia to the tune of some $38,000. We found, Mr. Speaker, non-payment of medical insurance premium to the tune of $123,318. Monies that were deducted from the employees were not paid to the insurance company. And what does that mean, Mr. Speaker? The claims from staff members were not being honored by the insurance company. Mr. Speaker, the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College had stopped issuing certificates to graduate students because of delinquency in payment of school fees by the foundation. Mr. Speaker, Lucia was threatening to cut power because of long overdue power bills. In short, Mr. Speaker, prudent financial management was non-existent. management had used the Workers' Gratuity Fund, Mr. Speaker. The fund from a high in 2016 when we left of $1.6 million, Mr. Speaker, we found in July 2021 a meager $33,000 in that fund, Mr. Speaker. From 1.6 million in 2016 to 33,000, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what does that mean, Mr. Speaker? This means that should a staff member of the foundation wanted to leave the foundation did not have the resources to pay them. Should the foundation, the management of the foundation, in its efforts at restructuring, decided to cut ties with some staff members who qualify for a gratuity, Mr. Speaker, the foundation did not have the resources to pay this staff member, Mr. Speaker. We found a VAT accumulator debt of $570,264, Mr. Speaker. We found funding of questionable projects was the order of the day. For example, Mr. Speaker, land clearance at Font-Saint-Jacques cost over $500,000, Mr. Speaker. Renovation of the Soufrière police station, $744,000, Mr. Speaker. Total owing to government for the lease of the Sulphur Spring Park, $1.8 million, Mr. Speaker. In addition, the foundation spent in excess of $3 million on projects. The payment for most is yet to be verified. Mr. Speaker, because of the financial situation, you had the staff members of the foundation working 1 or 2 days a week. So you had a situation where nobody was happy. Because none of the staff could get a decent, their basic monthly salary. Can you imagine working 4 days a week or 8 days, 4 days a month or 8 days a month, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, thankfully, Mr. Speaker, the new board which we appointed, and I want to say I kept my word, and the board members represent various communities and stakeholders in the constituency. The new board have taken some steps, and I want to report on some of the progress that we've made. The private insurer was paid, and now all workers' medical claims have been honored, Mr. Speaker. Credit facilities at all businesses have been re-established, Mr. Speaker. The amounts to the NIC and PAYE have been paid, Mr. Speaker. The gratuity bank account is on an upward path, Mr. Speaker. The Sir Alfred Lewis Community College have received most of the payments, and now certificates have been issued, Mr. Speaker. We were able this year to grant scholarships to the tune of some $47,000, Mr. Speaker. We have been able to install a port health facility to ensure that the cruise ships that have resumed their visits, the services at the ports are in order, Mr. Speaker. We have been able to install a tidal wave monitoring system on the jetty to ensure that our people, especially our people at Barons Drive, have early warning of any tsunami, Mr. Speaker. Our staff members, especially our security staff, have received firearm training, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Foundation is in the process of regularizing the Sulphur Spring emphatic list, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Foundation is in conversation with the government to regularize the Gropito Trail, Mr. Speaker, an issue that is causing much problems on the ground for us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all of this is happening while the Foundation continues to work and fulfill its mandate of improving the lives of the people. Mr. Speaker, I know that the people of Soufrière are very impatient. They are of the view that we should move with much faster pace. But Mr. Speaker, this government is a government that observes the law and operates within the law. So the steps that we have taken, when we came in, there was a financial audit in progress. This is still ongoing, Mr. Speaker. But we have commenced an operational review. I want to let the people of Soufrière know that we will await the results of the review and then we will act. Not before this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, good governance and ethical practice remains the hallmark of this administration. And consequently, I want to implore the patience of the people of Soufrière that while we wait, let us work together to transform our beautiful town. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Housing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to at least deliver a statement in this August chamber. I was expecting to hear from my predecessor what happened to the $38,000 that was paid to Third World by Soufrière Constituency Council. I was hoping to have heard from my predecessor why was Carnival Cruise Lines waived $500 million?
Minister, yes, Opposition Leader.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of clarification, there was no $38,000 ever paid to Third World. And there was in fact a case on that matter which went through the, unlike other matters, Mr. Speaker, went through a court process. The fact is,
members, please.
the fact that
Please, members, please. Proceed, Honorable Leader of the
Mr.
Opposition.
Speaker, the fact is that Sufair Foundation paid $38,000 for the erection of a stage and lights for the opening of the facility. Third World, the fee for the Third World was paid privately.
But member,
So the members made the allegation that
Leader of the Opposition,
Yes,
what is the point you're clarifying?
point of clarification is that he needs to retract this statement because it is wrong. And
But
there
he is
court
not-
case to substantiate that.
I am not aware that he has made any allegation about any particular person in here.
He said he thought he was going to hear as to how the money was spent. Okay, Mr. Speaker, and that's the allegation.
But yes, but
When in fact, the matter has been settled. Unlike other matters, Mr. Speaker, it has been settled in court.
But member, I don't, just a minute, member, Minister. Member, if you're going to make a statement for the record, the statement would have to be factual. It is not factual to say that what you have just said there is correct. There has been no settlement of that matter before the courts.
Speaker, you're incorrect. There was actually a decision that was made, and it was appealed. So the fact is that there is a judgment on this issue.
The judgment was
But again,
over.
my advice to the member from Cas 3 Central, if in fact he's so confident about the statement he's made, I already have 3 defamation cases against him. I'll be happy to have a full...
Member, listen, member, please, members, Leader of the Opposition, let me reiterate for the record. My information on this matter, yes, you are correct. A judgment was made at the High Court. That was appealed, and the Court of Appeal overturned that judgment and asked that the matter be heard by another judge. That is the recollection. To say the matter was settled is to mislead the House.
He's a stranger to the truth.
Member, be careful. So that is a misleading statement, and that statement will be struck off the record because it is incorrect.
Well, at the appropriate time, Mr. Speaker, I'd be very happy for you to read the judgment in the House.
Proceed, Minister.
You know, Mr. Speaker, let me continue. Because I didn't know this August chamber would enjoy the company of persons who seemingly on the periphery of insanity. Because you are clarifying a statement I made, but in your clarification admitting the very thing I said is true. All I said was they spent $38,000. The Sufair Foundation spent it on Third World. He admitted it.
Member, can you proceed if you...
I definitely will. But I also wanted to hear about the $500,000 that was waived for Carnival cruises. The Sulphur Springs money. I thought my learned friend would have touched on that. She didn't, but I will move on. Mr. Speaker, of late, myself, the National Housing Corporation and its board, and the government have come under tremendous pressure by an attack group they call themselves, though small but loud, who opine based on erroneous information that found itself in circulation in the media. But you see, Mr. Speaker, just a more than cursory inspection and complete reading of the very documentation on which utmost reliance is placed will reveal that those people got it totally wrong. The wrongfulness, Mr. Speaker, has a basis, I dare say, in political convenience, but it is far removed from reality. I speak to nothing else, Mr. Speaker, than the Shock and Talvin projects, which the former administration found fitting to enter into development agreements with Fresh Start on an 80-20 basis. Suffice it to say, Mr. Speaker, that this current board in their wisdom found it fitting to terminate both agreements for breaches that persist up to today. Mr. Speaker, it remains a documented allegation, yet to be refuted by the former administration, that corruption thrived in the last 5 years. Transparency International asserts that corruption was at its highest point in St. Lucia's history under the last administration. We knew it was bad, but we did not know it was that bad. By the way, who led the last administration? I need someone in this chamber to probably rearrange my ignorance. So, Mr. Speaker, the 2 agreements were signed to develop 2 housing projects between the National Housing Corporation and Fresh Start on December 30th, 2019 and September 7th, 2020 for Shock and Talvin respectively. Whilst I will not disclose everything, Mr. Speaker, the agreements and the infrastructural works that ensued thereafter have a myriad of problems. In essence, Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, 80% to Fresh Start was 80% of the proceeds of sale, and the 20% to us was 20% of the proceeds of sale, not even taking cognizance of the value of the land. In other words, the 20% for us should cover the value of our land and profits. In attempting, Mr. Speaker, to verify the culprits of such misdeed, the current board of directors at the National Housing Corporation searched high and low and cannot find any board minutes confirming that the former board of the National Housing Corporation had taken that decision. So I can say without an iota of self-contradiction that the 80-20% arrangement was not a decision of the board of directors of the National Housing Corporation. The question that begs to be answered, if it wasn't the board's decision, whose decision was it then? Mr. Speaker, I don't know. I need answers myself. But again, Mr. Speaker, what I can say with certainty and being equipped with documentary evidence, one of the agreements was signed by someone who was not even authorized to sign the agreement. Just like, Mr. Speaker, the ex-chairman of the Housing Corporation and the 16-lot story, for which again there was no board decision, Those agreements seemingly were signed somewhere in a corner to the exclusion of the board. The ex-chairman and the 16-lot story, for which there is no board decision, those other agreements, Mr. Speaker, stink of conflict of interest, if not corruption. One of the employees, one of the individuals who signed the agreement was an employee of Fresh Start. He was on the board. Mr. Speaker, is a whole melee. And it reminds me, that same board member, Mr. Speaker, is a member of the board. He charged NHC to design their new office $50,000 whilst being a member of the board. Yes, you know, $50,000. There's the other one, Mr. Speaker, and look at the melee. That's one member of the board who was working with Fresh Start. His office was in the ex-chairman's house. It's a big melee. Oh yes, an incestual relationship for financial gain. Look at this other one, Mr. Speaker. Fresh Start was given direct awards of $50 million. I wasn't Minister of Finance then, so it wasn't me. For $50 million. And the contract made provision for interest payment upon completion, quantification, and certification. But in less than 3 months, Timothy Mangal was collecting interest on $50 million to which Fresh Start had not been entitled. And I've said it on my show, I can say it anyway. And I begin to ask, who was the person authorizing the payment of that interest on $50 million even before the work was completed, far less quantified and certified? I didn't give them the direct award. It wasn't me. And the sum was $218,000 a month. It is the same Fresh Start and Timothy Mangal again, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, that is the kind of incestuous relationship that was happening within the government of the last administration. Basically infested with corruption. You know, I was given the contract where the board member charged the NHC $50,000. He went by the name of the Design Center. You are a board member. You are doing insider trading. The NHC has to move from one location to another. You charge them $50,000 as a board member. You do it yourself. Your office was at Timothy Mangal's house. After that, you move it to somewhere in Sanssouci. And that is what was going on. That is the kind of thing, and Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole world knows about the 16 lot story. 16 lots give to Timothy Mangal without paying NHC a cent. And when he builds and he sells, he will pay us. After he builds and sells, he will pay us. But let's vest the property in his name. Insider trading, they call it. Conflict of interest is right. And those were the things that were happening, Mr. Speaker. So you will now understand why our corruption level had been the highest under the last administration. Mr. Speaker, in relation to the two developments, DCA gave Fresh Start conditional approvals. Conditional approvals essentially mean the developments are approved as long as you comply with the conditions prior to commencement of the development. Mr. Speaker, I don't intend to lay out a complete defense to what might end up in the echelons of a court of justice, but I can refer and show 3 conditions that Fresh Start were obligated to comply with prior to the commencement of those developments, Mr. Speaker. The letters were given to them and they were asked. The first line reads, Mr. Speaker, that DCA considered your application and approved subject to the following conditions. That letter is dated February 7th, 2020. Mr. Speaker, condition 6. Condition 6 reads, the developer is to complete the installation of all infrastructure within the subdivision via a performance bond, financial guarantee from a local bank, the establishment of an escrow account for the sale of the lots, or installation of their own merits under the guidance and respect of the respective agency. The developer must indicate the preferred option to the DCA in writing. Those are some conditions here. Paragraph 7 of that letter reads, the developer to submit cost estimates for the installation of road and drain infrastructure approved by the Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Energy, and cost estimates for the electrical supply approved by Lucia. Copies of all approvals must be submitted to the DCA prior to the commencement of infrastructural works. Mr. Speaker, up to now, no performance bond. Mr. Speaker, up to now, no guarantee from any bank. Mr. Speaker, up to now, no cost estimates for road and drain. Mr. Speaker, up to now, the member for Castries North, his ministry has not approved any road network. Mr. Speaker, up to now, no cost estimates for electricity approved by Lucia. All of those things, Mr. Speaker, had to be done prior to the commencement of the infrastructural works. But then again, you know, Mr. Speaker, some people will have convenient difficulty in understanding. So I will say to them, all of those things had to be done before Fresh Start put anything on the ground, any machines, anything. I don't know if I can explain any further. I don't know. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding those conditions, notwithstanding that Fresh Start had not met those conditions, they started the development. They started the development. Just imagine, Mr. Speaker, DCA had to serve stop notices on Fresh Start one after the other in respect of the very development they want money for. I have one in my possession. Now I could make it a document of doubt. Yes, stop notices on Fresh Start for the development that they want money for. Even pictures, Mr. Speaker. Even pictures. You know? They never stop. Excavator and everything. You know, stop notice. You know, and today, till today, say from why you are, Mr. Speaker. You know, and that is the kind of thing, lawlessness. The last administration was run on total lawlessness. Somebody tell them, don't worry this year, do what you want. You know, and though, because they run government, Mr. Speaker, as though they were above the law. They were above the law. And what hurts me is notwithstanding those legal transgressions, you all want to make noise for what? What are you making noise for? Oh, a lot, 27 million, I'm coming to that in a while. If we sell the land, we can't get that. We have to take a loan to put the rest to pay them. That is how bad it is. Laden with stupidity. Mr. Speaker, that is the kind of travesty you get here. Stop notice. Conditions not met. I will go ahead and do what I want, and then they must pay me. You know, Mr. Speaker, what is even telling is that NHC decided to send a site technician long after the project had started, and to keep reports and to prepare monthly reports. In the site technician's monthly report for shock, she said that there were 2 recurring decimals in terms of outstanding issues. And the first one, Mr. Speaker, was there were no drawings. There were no drawings. The second issue, DCA had asked Fresh Start to redesign the project, because you cannot have a project with over 200 lots with one exit. Up to now, one exit is what is on the ground. C'est ça qu'a fait, il faut. And DCA had asked them to redesign the project. They never did. So they never redesigned, and the site technician has that in a monthly report from April 2020 to August 2021. A redesign and approved drawings. She has that. So when you hear all the empty vessels without substance, up to now there is one exit on site. You have 200 and something lots in a development with one exit. This year would never approve that. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, there are so many uphill battles that they need to climb that it approximates impossibility. And I am not prepared at this time to disclose all the artillery in our armory. No, we're not doing that. But there is a lot. I can warn them. There is a lot. Because enforceability of those agreements is their starting point. It is their starting point. Show me a board's decision. Mr. Speaker, on a final point. First, that claim they will sell the land at $20 a square foot. Hear this well. Based on the 80-20 agreement, Mr. Speaker, First Start will get $16 of every $20, and we that are the owners, the government and people and NHC of this country will get $4. For every square foot, First Start takes 16 and we get 4. Now in the agreement, Mr. Speaker, guess what? They have a total, the development is expected to yield 2.32,300,000 and blah 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 square feet of land. And they said that they will make a total of 32 million. Shock. Mr. Speaker, 32 million is the total according to First Start that will yield from the development. 80% of 32 million is what? Somebody tell me, my maths isn't that good. 26. So of 32 million, Mr. Speaker, First Start will get 26 million and the government will get 6. I want to repeat that. Based on the 80-20 agreement, First Start would get $26 million. But hear the joke. They have not done 20% of the work, but they now want 27 million. That's how laughable it is. They would have received $26 million, whereas government would get $6 million. Is that conscionable? Is that conscionable, Mr. Speaker? Huh? And you're telling me that someone had the audacity to cause persons to enter into this as if to bind NHC with First Start? Mr. Speaker, I believe I've done enough explaining for now. There are lots more to be said, lots more to disclose. But I will stick a pin here for now until further justification of the board's decision is required. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, I want to give thanks and praises to the Almighty God, because on July 26, 2021, He delivered us from a cabal. Had they remained there, St. Lucia would have been in the financial doldrums. We would have been, as there was somebody who said, the country is broke. The country is broke, but they got the country more broke and broke and broke. Yes. That is how bad it is. That is how bad it is, Mr. Speaker. But, you know, we had grown accustomed to a culture under the last administration, Mr. Speaker. On July 26, the financial carnage and the blatant thievery that passed for governance was stopped. It was stopped, Mr. Speaker. And I want to assure St. Lucians, all the St. Lucian public, that this government will continue both developments. We are continuing both of them, Mr. Speaker. The outrageous sum that First Start is asking, it is so outrageous that even if we sell all the land, we have to take a loan to pay them. That is how loaded it is with stupidity. But Mr. Speaker, what NHC has done is that we have put a team in place of reputable men, engineers and quantity surveyors, and they are tasked with two things to do. One is to value the works done to date on each project, and two give us an estimate for completion of each project. After that is done, Mr. Speaker, I assure you we will put the developments to tender, and the best bidder will get the job on each of the site. Fresh Start can then bid if they so desire, Mr. Speaker. But one observation that had been brought to my attention through documentation on my way was that in her report, the site technician said that although she came on site after Fresh Start had started, since she was stationed there, in her presence, Fresh Start had removed 70,400 yards of quarry waste from the site. They had removed 70,400 yards of quarry waste from the site, and according to her report, they were taken to other Fresh Start sites. I can say without fear of contradiction, some of that quarry waste was sold back to government, and Fresh Start got paid for that quarry waste. But that's for another show, Mr. And all of that is documented. So tell them they have to be very, very careful. You know, and if you check that 7,400 yards at a mere $30 a yard, Mr. Speaker, we are in the tune of $2.1 million or more. So the question is, did Fresh Start operate a quarry for themselves, and whilst operating the quarry, try and cut some roads? Or did they engage themselves in a development for the National Housing Corporation? I don't know what was going on. But all I can tell you is, Mr. Speaker, when that value is deducted from the value of works that have been executed to date, the remedial amount would be negligible. Negligible. But, Mr. Speaker, I will not do like those who just talk and talk and talk. Government must pay Fresh Start 44 million in 30 days. I will not do like them, Mr. Speaker. I will not say anything without having an evidential basis so to do. And so, Mr. Speaker, NHC and the board patiently await the final report from the team. Mr. Speaker, although we have been under pressure, we are holding back. We are holding back, and I want to end by asking a question. But before I ask the question, Mr. Speaker, I want to say this to this Honorable House. Just to change the signatories at the bank for NHC, we have to change the signatories with the coming in of a new government. The bank requested minutes of a board meeting. Minutes of a board meeting authorizing those new persons to be signatories. I have no difficulty with that. But yet, Mr. Speaker, NHC is being bound to the tune of millions and millions of dollars without a trace of that being sanctioned by the board. So here comes the question. If it was not the board's decision to enter into that 80-20 arrangement or arrangements with Fresh Start, the question is, whose decision was it? But I guess, Mr. Speaker, as we always say, time will tell. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I update you and colleagues in the Parliament and fellow St. Lucians on the ongoing fifth wave of COVID-19 infections in St. Lucia. Our medical professionals have approximated the commencement of the fifth wave at December 16, 2021. As of yesterday, January 31st, 2022, 7,780 cases have been diagnosed, of which 361 cases were reinfections. Women account for 59% of the cases, and the average age of the positive diagnosis is 35 years. For this period, Mr. Speaker, sadly, 29 people have died as a result of COVID-19 or COVID-19 related causes. Over the last week, the positivity rate has decreased to 44% from 47% the previous week. Infections are spread throughout the island. Tourists account for 2% of the cases diagnosed over the last 7 days. If the current trend continues, Mr. Speaker, we could experience even further decreases in cases toward the end of February. I repeat, if the current trend continues, we could experience even further decreases in cases toward the end of February. During this fifth wave, when we take into consideration the population at risk within the health districts, those with the highest occurrences, that is new occurrences or incidents of cases per 10,000 people, were from Babuno, Grosile, Castries, and Ancillary. Again, Mr. Speaker, when we take into consideration the population at risk within the health districts, those with the highest new occurrences of cases per 10,000 people were from Babuno, followed by Grosile, then Castries, and Ancillary. The health districts with the highest deaths per 1,000 people were Dennery, followed by Labri, then Babuno and Soufrière. The health districts with the highest deaths per 1,000 were number 1, Dennery, followed by Labri, Babuno, and Soufrière. We are seeing less severe illness and fewer deaths by percentage in people who have been vaccinated. 28% of our population is fully vaccinated and 31% with the first doses of the vaccine. Vaccination remains stubbornly low, with Ancillary and Canaries health districts having the highest coverage by percentage. Ancillary 28% and Canaries 27%. Babuno has the lowest coverage by percentage, 19%, followed by Grosile 20% and Castries 21%. I urge all St. Lucians to get vaccinated. I urge all my constituents to get vaccinated. I plead with the youth, the elderly, everyone to get vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, we have a problem. And this problem has been spoken of before. It is not new. But I repeat, we have a problem that over the last 30 years, non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, like cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, stroke, etc., accounted for between 71 to over 80% of deaths in St. Lucia, meaning that in the 70s, late 70s or so, research shows that over 71% of deaths in St. Lucia was a result of NCDs, or non-communicable diseases. Now, the deaths are over 80%, in some cases 84% per year. What does this mean, Mr. Speaker? This problem is on a collision course, a deadly one with COVID-19. And this has been said before. I want to reiterate that the majority of fatalities really mirrors the situation with our health status in St. Lucia. 57% of those who have unfortunately passed with COVID-19 or COVID-19 related conditions had hypertension. 57%. 48% had diabetes, problems with diabetes. 37% hypertension and diabetes, meaning a double whammy. Some people have both diabetes and hypertension. This means, Mr. Speaker, that the plea to get vaccinated is extremely important, especially for people with hypertension and diabetes, and other conditions. Globally, Mr. Speaker, the number of COVID-19 cases increased by 5% in the past week. As of January 23rd, 2022, over 346 million confirmed cases and over 5.5 million deaths have been reported in total. For the CARPHA member states in our region, this curve indicates that the region has peaked and generally cases have started to decline. The highest 7 days average since the start of the pandemic was noted on January 15th, 2022. In other words, Mr. Speaker, since the COVID-19 pandemic was declared, a couple years ago, this January 15th, we saw the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the region and in the world. So January 2022 was indeed a remarkable month for COVID-19. In an effort to effectively manage the fifth wave, the following were put in place and new actions were taken during this fifth wave. Procurement of additional supplies of reagents to allow for 2,000 tests daily. Additional procurement of PPEs to maintain the 3-month buffer supply. The restocking of the ICU drugs from alternate sources. Increases of 17 newly trained assistants for contacts with clients. Discussions are being held with PAHO to receive the effective COVID-19 drug, which is said to reduce mortality and mechanical ventilation requirements for patients with severe and critical COVID-19. We will report to you a little later on the details of this new drug. Very costly indeed. One vial of this new drug is US $3,625. We are hoping that the region can obtain a vial of this new drug for at least US $181. New budgetary allocations have been proposed in the 2022-2023 budget for a new education and communication strategy. A change in testing policy is being discussed as the demand for testing increases. And we will report on these changes after all consultations have happened with the medical professionals and the private sector. Moving forward, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to encourage containment of the spread of COVID-19 with closures of businesses at 9 p.m. and confinement of activities to homes and families at 10 p.m., except on Sundays, where we will encourage a reduction in public social activities by 6 p.m. School operations have been monitored, and the Minister for Education has been consulting with all stakeholders, including the Ministry of Health, on the appropriate measures for the safe reopening of schools and for the safe operations at schools. Announcements will be made by the Minister and Ministry officials as needed. A more detailed announcement will be made later this week on these measures, which will be in place for the month of February. We will also see a more targeted approach to the containment of the spread of COVID-19, and protocols for vaccination and operations of both public and private sectors will change after ongoing consultations have been completed. Mr. Speaker, je veux dire qu'ils ont fait COVID-19 là, très important, avec nous, ouais, coup ça là, depuis décembre, le 15 décembre, nous, le 16 décembre, nous, ouais, à chaque cas COVID monté en cette ici, avec ces cas ça là monté tout partout en région, avec à la terre. Toute information nous dit qu'à mutué, qui janvier l'année ça là, le 15 janvier, c'est temps où toute la terre ouais plus qu'à affaire COVID-19 ça là. Alors, M. Speaker, ça qu'a dit nous, c'est quand le COVID là, nous tenons coup ça là, c'est un COVID qui s'y met plus vite passer l'autre COVID un pays cette ici, avec un tout l'autre pays à la terre. M. Speaker, là nous regardons ces limo COVID là, nous avons semaine passée, la tenue plus moun ka joine COVID plus vite passer semaine ça là. Alors si bagay continue manière ka aller, nous ni l'idée en bout de février nous ka c'est cas COVID là ka descendre et bagay ka vinn plus meilleur. Moi ka dit encore si bagay continue parce qu'avec COVID ou pas savent qui les bagay là ka changer. Nous tuer concerné Mr. Speaker parce que en ces cas neuf là nous avons place qu'on va nous gozile, castui, eslawe, c'est ces places là nous avons plus qu'à neuf. Avec moun malheureusement qui a tout passé, nous avons plus moun regarder ces populations, ces différentes communes, plus moun a mort qui sorti en différents paroisses à Denry, avec Laboui, Babouno, avec Soufouye. Affaires vaccinant, nous avons cette liste toujours, il y a chaque moun qui par rapport au vaccinant, avec ces 28% population, tout celles qui ni ça nous rappelle en anglais fully vaccinated ou vaccinated. Mais c'est expliqué ça c'est un bagage qui difficile et qui a trois cassé nous en chaille. Raison qui a trois cassé nous, c'est parce que cette ici plusieurs monde qui a mort cette ici, si vous regardez 30 l'année qui passée, il y a mort avec diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke avec bail comme ça, avec la population cette ici. C'est ça qui a tué moun plus en cette ici. Avec les affaires COVID-19 là, il semble COVID qui a allé chercher ces moun là. Avec malheureusement, plusieurs moun qui mort avec COVID en cette ici. Nous avons mort avec high blood pressure, moun qui a high blood pressure avec ni COVID, c'est plus ces moun là qui tué passé malheureusement, moun qui a diabetes et moun qui ni diabetes et high blood pressure. Comme ça, moi, je demande tout gens cette ici. Est-ce que c'est moun qui a high blood pressure avec diabetes et bail comme ça? Moi, je plaider avec vous pour aller pour vacciner. Parce que nous avons qui c'est moun qui a high blood pressure avec diabetes et bail comme ça, qui ni vaccin, qui pas vacciner, yo pas malade sérieux si yo joine COVID comme moun qui pas pour vacciner. Avec nous avons famille nous même ka mort, gens nous ka mort et ça ga tout casser nous. Nous avons des gens pour pas vacciner avec continuer à travailler avec nous pour mener les affaires Covid dans descendre. L'année drug neuf, l'année pills neuf, mais ces pills là cher. Ces pills là cher. Avec ça nous avons nous essayer de mener ces pills à cette ici. Mais c'est l'Amérique avec l'autre place qui a fait et qui est cher. Pour ça nous avons dit mon point précaution plutôt nous espérer pour bagaille comme pills. Nous allons continuer à dire que nous sommes la caillou 10 heures, le dimanche, nous sommes la caillou 6 heures. Avec content qu'à approcher, content qu'à aller, nous passons à continuer avec un protocole qui a fermé la caillou, fermé tout business comme ça, parce que chaque pays qui a commencé à vivre avec Covid là, a une manière qui a fait des affaires, les gens qui sont vaccinés, aller faire des affaires, mais à même là, nous avons contrôlé les affaires. Before I end, Mr. Speaker, I wish to express gratitude to the workers at all our health and wellness centers, to all of the healthcare workers, the nurses, the doctors, the porters, those who take care, the sanitation workers, those who take care of the rooms and who sweep and mop, everybody who works at the healthcare and wellness centers, the hospitals, the Soufrière, the St. Jude Hospital, the Victoria Hospital, the Millennium Heights Medical Complex, all of the workers, we thank you, we appreciate you, we really love what you do. The Denry Hospital, I wish to say how pleased I was to visit people like Ms. Alcindor and the others whom I stop by every week just to check on them at the health and wellness centers and the hospitals. You can see, Mr. Speaker,
the enthusiasm, and even though these people have serious challenges at these hospitals and these health and wellness centers, when you go to these centers, the places are clean. I mean, I couldn't believe the places are clean, even though some of the walls need repair, like the Soufriere Hospital, a very old building. But when you go to these places and you see how clean these places are, and in the middle of a pandemic, and these people are trying their best to ensure that we get the best care, we must express thanks and gratitude. That's a labor of love for these people, Mr. Speaker. I wish to thank the boards and the management, especially the St. Jude Hospital board and a new board under the chairmanship of Mr. Elivic, and all the board members for their hard work. The Millennium Heights Complex board, Mr. Costello Mitchell and all of his board members who are starting to put things together, we thank you. All of the management and staff of the elderly homes. And you know, we're going to have a new focus in elderly affairs and our elderly population. The fire and police service. In a very special way, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the United States government for the donation of the field hospital, the 40-bed field hospital, and I wish to thank all those who assisted from before my time, during my time. When we came into government, there were processes in place, and we wish to thank those who started the processes, and we wish to thank those who continued. I want to thank the private sector, the Credit Union League, Mr. Gilroy Sapney and the others, Mr. Reno Kajada and his group of companies, the St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association, the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association. Between the time we came to Parliament the last time and now, these private sector organizations have come to our aid with supplies and ventilators. And there are many private individuals who don't want their names to be mentioned, but they are out there helping with the COVID-19 fight. I know you very well, but you have said to me, Musa, don't mention my name. Here is what I'm giving to the COVID-19 fight. We wish to thank you, all the embassies and governments. Thank you very much. But Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Mr. Cletus Springer and his team on the COVID-19 Management Center. Mr. Speaker, these people have come for tremendous criticism, insult, and all kinds of things. I wish to say to Mr. Springer and his team that, of course, people will not always agree with you. You are going to have spirited debates within the COVID-19 Management Center. We have individuals who are very strong in their views about what we should do. There are people who believe that the government must mandate vaccination and enforce it, make sure everyone is vaccinated and mandate it by law. There are others who believe you should do it differently. There are doctors who believe certain things about vaccination. There are doctors who don't believe certain things about vaccination. So it's a very dynamic situation. There are nurses who don't believe in vaccination. There are medical professionals who themselves are fighting it. While there are lots of medical professionals who tell you, yes, we should do it. So we are not a government that will just come to Parliament and shove things down people's throats. We know what is right. But every day we get up, every week we get up, we see what's happening in the international community and within the medical community itself. And while we are pushing vaccination, and we are going to continue to push it, there must always be room to allow for contending views and for debate and for people to express their views. So I thank Mr. Cletus Springer for his tenacity, and I wish to tell him that we support his efforts, and I wish to tell him to keep moving on. It's difficult, but the difference between this government and the former government, Mr. Speaker, is very simple. We will not come to Parliament and say, the world is going to learn from us. We are the best. We are the best. I can remember the statement the former Prime Minister made. We are the best in the world and boasting and so on. You'll never see us do that. We'll come to Parliament, and if in public we have to say we are sorry because we did something wrong with this protocol or that protocol, it was not the right thing to do, and then when we get enlightened, we come back and we say, we are going to change it because we did this wrong. Let's come together to work together. That's the kind of government we have. We are not dictators. We have not said to the opposition that you have lost your right to speak. We are not of that ilk, Mr. Speaker. We will consult.
And we'll call nobody backing dogs.
And we'll call no one backing dogs either. We'll consult. If we make mistakes, we'll come and say we made a mistake. Let's go back to the drawing board. We'll continue to consult with our doctors, with our patients, with the professionals, and we will do this together. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet colleagues and everyone who keeps giving us advice on the best way forward. We will not all agree, but this COVID-19 battle requires for all minds to come on board so that we can have a better day for our country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For Finance.
Mr. Speaker, no thanks. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statute instrument number 187 of
Prime Minister, just a minute. Are we finished with ministerial statements?
Yes.
Okay, well, papers to be laid, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statute instrument number 187 of 2021, legal professional eligibility, Roysdale, Alton, Ford order. Statute instrument number 188 of 2021, banking abandoned property regulation. Statute instrument number 189 of 2021, the Value Added Tax Act, resolution of Parliament to approve the draft Value Added Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 and 3 order. Statute instrument number 190 of 2021, resolution of Parliament to authorize the making of an order for the 2019 supplementary revised edition of the laws. Statute instrument number 195 of 2021, legal professional eligibility, Janel Zasa Bernard order. Statute instrument number 198 of 2021, 2019 supplementary revised edition of the laws commencement order. Statute instrument number 199 of 2021, payment system Eastern Caribbean automated clearinghouse system amendment rules. Statute instrument number 201 of 2021, excise tax amendment schedule 1 number 17 order. Statute instrument number 203 of 2021, fiscal incentives in Lucia Eye Hospital and Medical Center Limited order. Statute instrument number 204 of 2021, value added tax amendment schedules 1 and 3 order. Statute instrument number 205 of 2021, legal professional eligibility Shane Antonia Omar Thompson order. Statute instrument number 209 of 2021, income tax exemption, projects for roads improvement and maintenance program phase 4 and reconstruction of bridges in the cul-de-sac basin order. Statute instrument number 213 of 2021, excise tax amendment of schedule number 1, number 18 order. Statute instrument number 215 of 2021, banking licenses regulations. Statute instrument number 216, 2021, fiscal incentives FDL Consult Incorporated order. Statute instrument number 217, 2021, fiscal incentives FTR Manufacturing Limited order. Statute instrument number 218 of 2021, fiscal incentives Amana Consult Limited order. Statute instrument number 219 of 2021, fiscal incentives Furniture City Limited order. Statute instrument number 5 of 2022, legal professional eligibility Anman Ragolan order. Statute instrument number 6 of 2022, international business companies declaration of head office company Digital International Finance Limited order. Statute instrument number 8 of 2022, excise tax amendment of schedule 1 number 1 order. Fiscal Financial Intelligence Authority 2020 annual report for the period January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory instrument number 191 of 2021, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, St. Louis Property Limited, amendment order. Statutory Instrument Number 192 of 2021, Tourism Incentives, St. Louis Property Limited Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument 193 of 2021, Tourism Stimulus and Investment, a Viceroy Resort Order. Statutory Instrument Number 194 of 2021, Tourism Incentives, Jalousie 1996 Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 206 of 2021, Citizenship by Investment, Boniface Amandianis Odenigbo Revocation Order. Statutory Instrument Number 210 of 2021, Tourism Incentives, Lucian Style Development Corporation Order. Statutory Instrument Number 211 of 2021, Tourism Incentives, Harbour Vista Inn Inc. Order. Statutory Instrument Number 2 of 2022, Citizenship by Investment Amendment Regulations. Citizenship by Investment CIP 2021 Annual Reports.
Minister for Commerce, Manufacturing, Business Development.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to lay the following papers appearing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 197 of 2021, External Trade Restricted Imports Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument Number 200 of 2021, Price Control Amendment Number 18 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 212 of 2021, Price Control Amendment Number 19 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 7 of 2022, Price Control Amendment Order Number 1, Amendment Number 1 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 9 of 2022, Consumer Protection Act Commencement Order.
Minister for Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs, which I skipped you a while ago.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 192A of 2021, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Physical Distancing Number 18 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 192B of 2021, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Prohibition of Assembly Number 15 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 192C of 2021, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Protocol Public Omnibus Amendment Number 3 Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 202 of 2021, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Physical Distancing Number 19 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 207 of 2021, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Physical Distancing Number 20 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 208 of 2021, Drugs, Prevention of Misuse, Cannabis Cultivation Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 214 of 2021, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Prohibition of Assembly Number 16 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 1 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Physical Distancing Number 1 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 2 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Prohibition of Assembly Number 1 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 3 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Protocol Public Omnibus Regulations. Thank you.
Senior Minister and Minister for Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 196 of 2021, National Utilities Regulatory Commission, Names of Commissioners, Amendment Notice.
Motions. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas under Section 109(1)(e) of the Value Added Tax Act 15.42, the Act, it is provided that the Minister of Finance may, by order published in the Gazette, amend the schedules in the Act And whereas it is further provided under Section 1092 of the Act that an order made pursuant to Section 1091 of the Act is subject to an affirmative resolution of Parliament except when the amendment is to customs tariff headings only. And whereas the Minister of Finance seeks approval of the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 3 order to amend Schedule 3 of the Act by an affirmative resolution of Parliament to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household consumables contained in barrels for the period commencing from the first day of February 2022 and terminating on the 31st day of March 2022. Be it resolved that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, approves the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 3 order, which amends Schedule 3 of the Act to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household consumables contained in barrels for the period commencing from the first day of February 2022 and terminating on the 31st day of March 2022. Mr. Speaker, this resolution seeks to increase the incentives allowed to citizens for the importation of barrels from their relatives abroad. The end date was January the 31st, but the government has decided that we will extend it for 2 months, the months of February and March, to end at the end of March. Mr. Speaker, it's passing strange that we are here this morning to do that, because it was this government, it was our government being on that side, under the leadership of Kenny Anthony, that introduced the barrel incentive to the people of St. Lucia. And at that time, I remember distinctly that there were people who opposed it vehemently, who said that we were causing a loss of revenue, who said that we were encouraging people to import things to sell and not for the personal use, and who said all sorts of things. Because anytime we try to do something to put the people first, we get opposition from some sections of the community. Anytime, Mr. Speaker, anytime that this government, whether it's facility fees, whether it's CXC fees, anytime you get opposition, because they do not, some of them do not believe, Mr. Speaker, that the people of St. Lucia must come first. So, Mr. Speaker, several reasons, several factors have come into play. There have been issues with the supply chain, in that things that were ordered because of the COVID crisis, things that were shipped from England, from the States, they got caught and did not arrive, or did not arrive for the end of January. And there were other factors, Mr. Speaker, like the people have lost their jobs, some of them have not fully got back to being employed, and they still are in need. So we decided that in spite of the fact that we're going to be losing revenue, we believe that money cannot be before people, Mr. Speaker. And we also believe that we must see about our people, even if it comes at a price, which is the loss of revenue to the states. But the government hopes to make that money back by the elimination of the corruption, the waste that existed under the former administration. We will try our best to make back some of that money, Mr. Speaker. So I want to tell the people of St. Lucia that we've extended that concession for 2 months, for February and March, and I ask members to support. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Be it resolved that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, do approves the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 3 order, which amends Schedule 3 of the Act to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household consumables contained in barrels for the period commencing from the first day of February 2022 and terminating on the 31st day of March 2022. Member for Suzel Saltibus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we on this side support the extension of the barrel concession because we recognize there are thousands of families who have definitely come under strain as a result, particularly as a result of the COVID pandemic and for other reasons for people who have lost their jobs, etc. But Mr. Speaker, you know, as a parliamentary representative, there are a number of inquiries to my office, and I'm sure members around the table would have had similar inquiries seeking clarification as to whether the government would have been extending the concession period, particularly because as a result of COVID, Customs and Excise had to implement a sort of an appointment system. And so therefore, the kind of traffic that you would have going to Customs and where people have been able to clear their barrels a lot quicker would have been delayed. And so, Mr. Speaker, with all of these sort of inquiries, you know, there sort of was a sort of unnerving period for many people who would not have been able to afford. And I'm of the opinion that the government should have come out a lot earlier to give a sort of a indication to the people that yes, we would have been extending that to take away that worry from many people, Mr. Speaker. So that is one of the caution, well not caution, the points I would like to put out there to the government. So when you care about people, you want to take away that element of worry so that at least they're aware that the government will be taking care of that particular issue. The other concern I have, Mr. Speaker, is that while at the same time the government poses to care about the people and extending the concession, and we truly appreciate that, Mr. Speaker, because when we recognize the issue of COVID, I think we made an unprecedented move to have brought forward the barrel concession about 6 months earlier than it normally would have been put in place, Mr. Speaker. So we recognized some of the struggles of the majority of people, and you know we have to think ahead before they actually impacted in a severe way, because when these barriers come, they are shared among several family members. But Mr. Speaker, at the same time that the government is assisting, Mr. Speaker, giving with one hand and taking away with the other, several of my constituents, Mr. Speaker, were targeted as it relates to contracts being taken away from them, Mr. Speaker. And I want, Mr. Speaker, to put that on the table, because a lot of it happened even before contracts, Mr. Speaker, were expired. A lot of it happened before contracts were expired, Mr. Speaker. And I want the government to remember, Mr. Speaker, that when we came in 2016, and I can speak for myself, Mr. Speaker, I made it a point, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that there were people who remained, Mr. Speaker. I personally, I cannot speak for other people, I can speak for myself, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we must, and I want to bring it to the Prime Minister's attention, because, he has said that he's going to be a government of inclusivity and take care of all the people, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, when you have an individual who was rejected by the people of Choiseul Saltibus, who wants to go around, Mr. Speaker, indicating who's going to be getting contract, who's not going to be getting contract, this is something we must take into consideration, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, when you say you're taking care of everybody in the community, Mr. Speaker, we must take note we had the Taiwanese government. The Taiwanese government gave the government a grant of $4 million to assist with housing, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking to the motion. It ties in because there are people who benefit and people who don't benefit. Mr. Speaker, when the minister, well, not the minister, but when there's you recognize us, one of the largest constituencies in St. Lucia, Choiseul, Saltibus, and you want to allocate out of that $4 million, $22,000, Mr. Speaker, to assist, Mr. Speaker, by choice, Mr. Speaker, by choice, you did not accept it, Mr. Speaker. Okay? So, Mr. Speaker, there are so many of them, Mr. Speaker. You have somebody who's not a parliamentary representative being given 3 times the amount of the parliamentary representative to do work in the community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these things must be put on the record. So, Mr. Speaker, I thought it was an important time to put that to the Honorable Prime Minister, because a lot of people believe his words that he was, going to come in, to see after all, Mr. Speaker. Albeit, obviously, the people on your side would benefit greater, Mr. Speaker. But when we look at how the pie is shed, Mr. Speaker, it is very heartbreaking. So I support the extension, Mr. Speaker, but I want to bring to the members' attention, let us be a little more fair in how you go about distributing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Member for Castries South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to stand and express my support for the motion as presented by the member for Castries East and Prime Minister to extend the concessions for the importation of barrels for further 2 months. As he indicated, this originally was a program introduced by the member for Vieux-Fort South in a previous Labour Party government, and it reflected our concerns with the plight of ordinary people in this country who had relatives living overseas in the diaspora and could send barrels back home to them to assist them in enjoying the festive season. Of course, we all know, Mr. Speaker, in the years that followed, even persons of middle class and higher income earners started to use the barrel concession, and it was no longer a benefit extended to just ordinary working St. Lucians. But nevertheless, it has now become a feature of our St. Lucian life, and certainly many of my constituents were asking me whether or not the extension would have been granted. And like many other parliamentarians in this House, we made representation to the Minister of Finance and requested that such an extension be granted. Mr. Speaker, in expressing our
members,
motion,
member of Castries South, just a minute. Member of Castries Central, it's not permitted to name members in the House. Please refrain from doing that.
Mr. Speaker, I did not hear him, so I'm not even sure.
Person who matters heard him.
Well, your ears are a little sharp, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in expressing support for the motion and listening to the member from Choiseul Saltibus, one cannot help but be bitterly disappointed. It appears he's still so traumatized by the defeat last year that he's not been able to come to terms with the realities, Mr. Speaker. I listen, and I must say to you, Mr. Speaker, the member from Choiseul Saltibus once said that he's a person who would love to go by the river and he's not a politician. Maybe he should go back by the river permanently, Mr. Speaker, and allow his opponent to really take charge of affairs and put the people first in Choiseul, Mr. Speaker, because he's not even learned the fundamentals of putting people first, Mr. Speaker. The honorable member would recall in saying that the Prime Minister brought this too late to the House. During the last government, Mr. Speaker, it's a painful experience for me.
The toys.
Painful experience. The member from Miku South, in his typical vindictive manner, came into this house a week or so before Christmas. A week or so before Christmas, with a motion to allow items to be brought in on concession, including toys, decorations, lights, gifts, a week before Christmas. And we stood up and we said, how can that be? When you are coming to this house a week before, what time do we have to order stuff to reach here before Christmas for our constituents? And they laughed at us. They laughed at us. And they backdated the motion to November because they knew that their toys was already on its way. And some had arrived before the sitting of the house. And they laughed at us. So we sat there a week before Christmas wondering, how can we now order toys? How can we now order toys when this was just coming to the house? This same member from Social Saltibus sat across there. He never said anything in our support or defense, privately or publicly. And worse, Mr. Speaker, they got toys from the Taiwanese embassy and they were refusing to share it with us, Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker, if you want to deny me, stand on a point of order. When we made an appeal in this house, a certain member who's no longer here stood up and said, if y'all want toys, y'all can come to a warehouse somewhere and collect.
I went.
I won't even see what happened when you went. And some of us said we're not submitting ourselves to that kind of treatment. And we did not go for it. The member from Social Saltibus sat there and said nothing, Mr. Speaker. Nothing. The member from Social Saltibus sat there, and a member from Grizzly stood up and boasted they had fired all the nice workers simply because they were supporters of the Labour Party. And he said nothing, Mr. Speaker. Nothing. And then he came back. He had said because 80% of them were Labour. When we chastised him, he came back and he said, I am repeating it, 90% or whatever were Labour. And the member said nothing, Mr. Speaker. So today he is complaining about contracts. I have not relieved anyone in my constituency that had any contract under the previous government, Mr. Speaker. I have not done it. I have not done it, Mr. Speaker. So the member now discovers that maybe one or two persons' contract were ended in his constituency and maybe not renewed, but he's upset. But he said nothing when they fired over 1,000 persons in this country. And many public servants, persons were treated with utter disrespect and disdain by the last government, maliciously, especially by the former Prime Minister. And he said nothing, Mr. Speaker. And he is complaining, Mr. Speaker, about how much money he's getting. In Castries South, Mr. Speaker, nothing had happened for the last 5 years. Not a road was fixed. The Pastor Joseph Community Center is the same way it was from 2015 going into 2016. It will be finished in the next financial year, Mr. Speaker. And the member from Social Saltibus sat there and said nothing, Mr. Speaker. When a former candidate who went up against me got hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend, I got nothing, Mr. Speaker. He sat there and did not say anything, Mr. Speaker. And he's found his voice. He's no longer by the river. He's now a politician, Mr. Speaker. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? The member from Castries is a gracious Prime Minister. He's a gracious Prime Minister. He's a model of humility and an understanding of what it means to serve the people and put the people first. And every member here can tell you, at Cabinet, he says, members of the opposition must be treated with dignity and decency. Decency. Every time. Exactly. I'm not doing them like they did to us, Mr. Speaker. But ingratitude, Mr. Speaker, knows no bonds. Mr. Speaker, the member from Social Saltibus will come here today and pretend he wants to express his disappointment and his hurt, you finally become a politician, honorable member. From now on, you'll be treated like a politician. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I have to add my voice. I have to add my voice.
Member of Castries Central.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Speaker, I need to add my voice to this one, albeit for a very, very short period of time, because I'm now hearing of vindictiveness. I'm now hearing of deprivation. I'm now hearing of equality of treatment. But who knows that better than the member from Miku South? When Janine Compton was attempted to have been installed by the trust, which needed the approval of the Prime Minister at the time, what did he say? She don't like my party. She don't like my party. So the decision is mine. And he refused to endorse her. What did the then member of I call her member, the senator who orders a ministry against equity, she opened her mouth in the presence of the member from Miku South, who was then Prime Minister, and said as long as constituencies don't follow or share the philosophy of the United Workers' Party, then essentially you will get nothing. What did he say about that? He implicitly endorsed it, Mr. Speaker. He has to drive her because she said the member of Miku South is a caring man. He gave me my husband to bathe me all day. But me too have I. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, that one you can identify with, the law gives senators a duty-free vehicle, went into cabinet, came out with a conclusion that says senators that are ministers. He attempted, Mr. Speaker, to amend the law in cabinet because senators were entitled to duty-free. There was a conclusion that contradicted the law saying senators that are ministers. If I lie, say I lie. If I lie, say I lie. That is the kind of thing that has been going on, Mr. Speaker. I brought in a vehicle. I had a letter from the then Speaker of the House, Andy Daniel, that says I'm entitled to a duty-free vehicle. When I got here, the famous Chico, Mr. Speaker, who was then whatever at customs, called the Prime Minister's office and indicated to me that they say you're not entitled to duty-free. Yes, the matter is in court up to today. That is the kind of vindictiveness with which those guys led this country, Mr. Speaker. And today, you have the audacity to talk about equality of treatment? Zapakahot? I mean, Mr. Speaker, let's face it. All of what the guys have done, the administrator of the CDP program, who in their view was sympathetic to the Labour Party, he was fired on vacation just after June 6, 2016. On vacation he was fired. Went into Soufre, stopped the Soufre Square, changed contractor because the contractor that was there was not sympathetic to them, and have the audacity now to talk about equality of treatment. You know, Mr. Speaker, I have to laugh. I have to laugh because I'm waiting for another part of the debate. I'm waiting for another part of the debate where this member from Miku South, as Prime Minister, rented 5 offices from his father under his stint. 5. You know, bringing up our annual rent from about $37 to $72 million a year. Sold our Dahemol. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? I don't know who does that, which Minister of Finance. It has to be a Minister of Finance, not Finance. Because how on earth you sell a mall for 13.5 million EC, but in that sales agreement, you are guaranteeing the man rent of over $50 million in 15 years? Huh? And then you have the audacity to talk about public spending. And Mr. Speaker, I will await that other part of the debate. But please, they know about the kind of inequality. They know how this dictator rule. If you are not with me, you will get absolutely nothing, even if the law entitles you to it. And that is the kind of thing we have. And there are loads of senators who are waiting a decision in my case, because even when, Mr. Speaker, as you are aware again, the Salaries Reviews Commission made recommendations for the increase in salaries. You remember that, Mr. Speaker? It was tabled in the House and by extension became law. What did a member for Miku South do? He chose his people, that one, that one, that one. And he applied the increase to them whilst denying everybody else at that time. But you know, Mr. Speaker, those injustices must come back to haunt you. They must come back to haunt you, because when you can look at Sir John's daughter, the founding father of the United Workers' Party, and refuse to endorse her, even if the entire trust was behind her, my party, it will not be a party for a long time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be back.
Member for Miku South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, words are words. And that's why they say that action always speaks louder than words. We have this morning, just on this bill alone, Mr. Speaker, witnessed a group of men and women who continue to profess words and continue to believe that just because they say so, that is how it is. We have members, particularly my very good friend from Castries Central, who continue, oh, my good friend.
No, on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
What is the point of order, Mr.
the member is trying to mislead the House, because myself and him do not fall within the periphery of what is labeled as friends.
Yeah, but remember, he did not say you were his friend. He said he was yours.
I'm always so impressed with my learned friend and his ability to provide just enough information that causes people to be able to sit back and continue the sentence. You know, the power of the pause. Say a sentence, leave it for there, let it hang, and then allow people maybe who are not as informed to just carry on. And sadly, Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves in a time when people's trust of government, people's trust of politicians has reached a point where most people who wait for that pause and want to continue it really have very little things to say that are good. I give the example, Mr. Speaker, the member continued to malign my name in suggesting that the roundabout at Rodney Bay was put there because my father owned land there. So it's good to say, because it's a factual...
Member for Miku, so, I haven't heard that allegation being made in the House. If it is made elsewhere, it is of no moment to this House. But certainly, this morning I have not been made aware of such a statement.
So, Mr. Speaker, are we saying that I should not go down that road, but other members were given the liberty of introducing things? For instance, they were able to bring in the situation with duty-free cars and benefits, and that's okay.
No, I didn't say that. the members were responding directly to statements made by the member for Suzel Saltibus, who was suggesting certain inequalities on the part of the Prime Minister regarding this bill. And they were saying to him, but you said nothing when certain things happened in this House. The references they made were things which occurred in this House.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, but the fact is the member from Castries Central made suggestions of decisions that he claims I made and providing information and suggesting how I acted. All I'm simply saying is the member from Castries Central has made it clear on his show and in other public forums that the reason why the roundabout was located where it was is because my father owned land there. Now that's a factual statement.
Oh, it's a factual statement?
It's a factual statement.
So your father owns land?
My father owns land there.
Oh, so what's the problem?
So the issue though is providing the facts of the story. The fact is the amount of land that was acquired from my father was 400 square feet. That part he forgot to say. He also forgot to say that my father gave the 400 square feet for free. Now, again, I use that as an example, Mr. Speaker, of when you provide a half-truth. So when the member would have suggested, as an example, that I, as the minister, had the authority to amend what the Salaries Review Committee did,
Mr. Speaker.
there's nothing further from the truth, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Remember, he didn't say that. He said you did not have the authority, not that you had it. He said you did it absent of the authority.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
He said you amended it even though you did not have the authority.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm agreeing with him. I did not have the authority and could not amend it.
Mr. Speaker,
So
point
the part that the member from Castries said Central, and you know, and the sad part is,
Member for Castries Central, what is the point of order?
A point of order, Mr. Speaker. The member for Miku South is misleading the House, Mr. Speaker. He intimated that his father gave the land for free. He just said that, Mr. Speaker. However, there is a compulsory acquisition that was gazetted in relation to his father's land. If your father gave land for free, it cannot be gazetted as a compulsory acquisition, which makes government liable. So he's actually misleading the House, Mr. Speaker. Ask him to withdraw that statement.
Proceed, member for Miku South.
Mr. Speaker, again, you know, this is we don't really have to even go that far. Again, a misleading fact. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is in order for government to obtain ownership of the land, because the land would have belonged to him, they had to do it through a process of compulsory acquisition. The compensation fact, yes. So you can do a donation, but the fact is the government went and did the compulsory acquisition in order for the land ownership to be transferred to the state. Now the compensation factor, and the minister knows that, comes afterwards. So, Mr. Speaker, there are other statements that were made with regards to nice workers were fired.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order. Mr. Speaker,
what's the point of order?
The substantive motion before us has to do with the extension of the period. The member is rebutting comments made by persons and not even referred to the motion by name or by substance. It would really be, you know, in order that the member for Miku South sticks to the motion. One understands you do answer comments made in the debate, but it cannot be a substantive rebuttal to all comments made by the member from Castries Central. I mean, let us stick to the motion before the House. And I would really appreciate you telling him to stick to the motion before him.
Member for Castries South, certain statements were made that directly impugn the member for Miku South as part of members' contribution to the bill. I think the member from Miku South is perfectly entitled to rebut those statements. Proceed, member from Miku South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We have come often to this House and also into the public arena where allegations were made that my administration fired the nights workers. And the evidence is there. You can go and research it yourself. In fact, the nights workers' contracts were allowed to come to their end, their natural end. Nobody was fired. unlike what has taken place presently, where NICE workers have been fired and have been asked to terminate their contracts prematurely. And it seems to be a behavior, a pattern of behavior in many of the institutions in St. Lucia. Just in the members from Miku, from Castries South, CIP, a professional. He was asked to terminate his contract early. He was bullied, and certain allegations were made by the minister about him. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to get into the actual details because I certainly can in responding to all of these allegations. Would you like to stand up and object? By all means.
You know, the member from Miku South will say to this House that we bullied the CEO at CIP. And really say, Mr. Speaker, for the sake of clarification, there were a lot of issues relating to the conduct of the CEO at CIP, including being asked by a certain person to delete material from the server. And at the appropriate time, you will be asked to account and find out exactly how much you know about that. And that, among other things, led us to ask him to leave. But if you want me to say more, Mr. Speaker, I will at the right time reveal more, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful for that clarification, and I would certainly encourage the member from Castries South and any other minister that has any information that is questions the propriety or the legality of what anybody did, by all means, I think that you should come out with it. I think that we should all know, because some of the practices that we've seen under this government is...
Remember, would you like to debate the motion, the bill before us?
Of course I would.
Okay.
But as you said, Mr. Speaker, there are things and statements that are being made that I must defend. So, Mr. Speaker, there are things which are taking place in this country which the public deserves explanation. As hard as that information may be in implicating anyone, I welcome it. And if it's any piece of information that certainly can hold people accountable, because I want to remind members of this House, it was under the United Workers' Party administration in the second session of Parliament in which we amended the Crown's Act, the Crown's Proceeding Act, which took out the statute of limitations. And we did it at the beginning of our administration. So it means that members can take their time, make sure you get all your facts right, because there is no statute of limitations. If any
member from Miku South, if you proceed at the trajectory that you're going to, I would have to ask you to stop. You're not addressing the bill that is before us. You're going in all sorts of tangential areas. Please focus on the bill before us. I did allow you certain latitude because certain things were said about you, but you are introducing new information that was not spoken of, and I cannot allow that.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill before us is a good bill. And I think all of us can applaud the need to have extended the concessions. My colleague from Choiseul, Saltibus, pointed out that one of the problems that the consumer or the people are facing is the new appointment system. And in many ways, we felt that the government ought to have extended the period of the concession time. But, Mr. Speaker, there's a bigger issue that's taking place in St. Lucia and globally, and that's called inflation. Inflation that is being caused by a shortage of goods because the supply chain is being affected. And I would like to think that part of the reasoning for bringing this bill was to bring some relief to households on the cost of living. But what I would have expected to have heard in the presentation, instead of the typical political diatribe, is an understanding.
Member, to refer to a contribution by another member as diatribe is to offend the standing orders. And I would ask you to withdraw that statement.
Thank you for guiding me, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so guided. So what I'd like to maybe is rephrase it.
Are you withdrawing the statement?
Of course, Mr. Speaker. By all means. I'm always guided by you, sir. But what I will say is that what one would have expected in introducing this bill, that there would have been a further explanation at that time, Mr. Speaker, as to how the government intends to deal with inflation in general, the cost of living increases that people are feeling, and that especially a government that said that they were going to put people first. You would have thought that that's something that would have actually come natural. So the reality of many of the things that were introduced by members in government on this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, really had nothing to do with the plight of the people. This is what everybody wants to hear. This is one of the biggest things that are confronting not only the people in St. Lucia, but globally. And it is real. And the fact is that there is no easy solution to this problem, Mr. Speaker. There are many things that are causing the price of goods to go up. There are many things that are causing shortages. Every day we see on our TV, in developed worlds, which would have never had shortages of products, that grocery shop shelves are lacking those products. And we see this significant increase in inflation. And Mr. Speaker, that inflationary cost is bringing up a more critical issue, which is the prospect that interest rates are going to go up. Now, considering St. Lucia has not yet recovered from the impact of the pandemic, which it's well documented as to what it's caused. Sorry? 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 I didn't say any recovers. I said the situation in St. Lucia, which is well documented, that we have not recovered. And there are economic indicators and social indicators to remind us every single day. But those are numbers to us. But the people who are really feeling it are the people in their homes, because there is not an adequate social net system in our country to deal with them directly. So I applaud the member from Dennery South when he speaks about 140 vouchers going out to help people. That's fantastic. But that pales in comparison to the number of people that are in need. And I would really like to suggest, and maybe use this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, on the presentation of this bill, that this is a good bill, but it is very short in dealing with what people are facing. And what people want is strong leadership. What they want is not a government of excuses. They want a government that is actually going to have solutions to those problems. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping the government will take heed and present as soon as possible. We don't even have to wait for the budget, because this is a current issue now. This is a crisis that people are facing. And I'm really imploring us that when we're in this house, I have zero difficulty. I have broad shoulders. I'm standing here accountable for what my administration did and what I did personally. And as I said to you, the law was amended in order there will be no time constraints if in fact I did anything improper or anyone in my administration did anything improper. But the reality is the crisis today is the cost of living, the impact it's having on the quality of life for St. Lucians. And again, I want to say that this is a good move in the right direction, but it pales in comparison to what needs to be done and the crisis that we're facing. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Likud North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to express my support to this motion. And as a young politician, Mr. Speaker, I still think that I'm on the learning curve, but I listened to the presentation made by several members here this morning, and to my colleague parliamentary and the member for Likud South. And it's very concerning, Mr. Speaker. as a young man, you look at the Prime Minister, member for Castries East, who vows to put people first. And when he stands or when he makes a decision to extend for a further 2 months, allow he understands the difficulties and the problems that we've had in the supply chains. And him being somebody who is sensitive to the plight of the poor people and to all people in St. Lucia, making that decision, you hear talks about, oh, what we should be concerned about is the increase or inflation. Mr. Speaker, we're a government that came in about 6 months ago. And when we came in, before we came in, the former administration were there, and they were faced with, I'm sure at the time they were still aware of inflation and the trajectory that things were going to take. But yet still they chose to borrow money for COVID and use it for all sorts of things that would not bring no kind of reprieve to poor people in St. Lucia. But today, we stand in the house with the audacity like we care so much about the plight of poor people and the inflation. And Mr. Speaker, it is very concerning for me as a young man to see that this is what we're going to, or this is what the member is going to stand and make mention of about inflation and not give credit to the decision, the brilliant decision the Prime Minister in his wisdom has taken to extend this concession for a further 2 months. There are people in Mikudnov now who I know are smiling because they are beneficiaries of this program. And the good thing about that, I heard everybody, even the member for Choiseul, made mention of victimization or where several contracts were taken. This decision does not discriminate against nobody in St. Lucia. Anybody can bring down a barrel. All the constituents in Choiseul, those in Mikud South, those in Mikud North, this is extended to everybody in St. Lucia. So this is a decision that is not discriminatory. And I'm happy that the Prime Minister found it in his wisdom to give that further extension. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, I think it is very sad to see that we had several millions, hundreds of millions of dollars borrowed in the name of COVID. And it was not utilized to bring or to reduce the plight of the poor man. But rather, and I can remember the words of the member for Castries East when he said over $20 million for maybe just a little over a mile of road. And we can think of the amount of things that $20 million can do for the people of St. Lucia, especially the poor people, especially in Mikudnov. I have a lot of use for $20 million in Mikudnov as we speak. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to stand and express my support to this motion and to thank the Prime Minister for good judgment and good wisdom. And our Prime Minister who has kept to the mantra and the mandate of his party about putting people first. And a Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, before I came into politics and I listened to debates, I heard members from Dennery North and Castries South complain about them not getting anything happening in their constituency. And for the Prime Minister to today say, whatever you do, ensure that you take out Dennery, you take out Choiseul, and you take out the fair share for Mikud South. He could have chosen to go the same way. But he is a man who is humble, and I applaud him for that humility. I know at times maybe the opponent or the then opponent of the member for Choiseul might be a little upset with the Prime Minister for extending such courtesy to the member. A courtesy that was never afforded to the members of the then opposition. Yes, I know. I think if there was a problem, you would have stand on a point of order. But, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that I want to let my voice be added to in support to that motion and to thank the Prime Minister for his decision. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
They can't interview for
The member for Grizzly.
They can't interview for
Mr. Speaker, I certainly did not intend to speak in today's sitting of Parliament, considering the volume of work that is required in the constituency of Grosley. I really expected that this particular motion would not garner so much interest, considering how necessary it is. But when I sat down and I listened to the member for Choiseul describe this government of the St. Lucia Labour Party as being one who gives in one hand and takes from the other hand, I figure that he must be speaking about his government when they were in power. Mr. Speaker, the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party in 6 months, and in fact in the first 100 days, ensured that the facilities fees were paid for every single parent and student in this nation. So every single youth was given the opportunity to go to school. This government ensured that CXC maths was not paid for some, but for all the students in St. Lucia. And you can describe this government as taking in one hand and giving in the next. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today very proud of being a young man who can sit back in a cabinet led by the honorable member for Castries East. Very proud. Because not only are we extending the barrel concessions today, I can go back in the constituency of Grosley and I can say to my people in Grosley that this Prime Minister, along with the member for Castries North, along with his team, can say to the people of Grosley and Casaba and Cap Estate and all of St. Lucia and the region that they will gain access to the beaches because we as a St. Lucia Labour Party ensures that they can get access, not just on golf carts. We are not just sitting there only giving concessions for barrels. We are changing lives in this nation after having a government that did nothing to preserve their lives. And so to sit here, somebody I admired in banking as a young man, to hear him say that this government gives with one hand and takes from the next. Mr. Speaker, I heard the member for Miku. Speak on inflation. Miku South. And I almost, my jaw dropped. Because this is the same minister when he was in government as a Minister of Finance and even before campaigned on reducing prices in this nation by reducing and eventually eliminating VAT. Spent 5 years, took VAT from 15% to 12.5%, and what we reaped in this country was inflation and millions of revenues lost that we as a government now have to ensure we do everything for our people. And so these barrel concessions will benefit the people of Grosley immensely. I find many times that even in the conversations with my compatriots that I have to explain to them that though when they drive on the road, the Castries-Grosley Highway, they see beautiful houses, and they pass through Bonte and Rodney Bay, they see beautiful houses. But the level of poverty in Grosley is real. And the actions taken by the member for Miku South in government has further exasperated their situations. When you go through some of the communities, even in Corinth, even in Moshi, even in Grand Riviere, and you see the struggles, not to mention Deramo, you see the struggles of our people. I have to always explain to my compatriots that a barrel concession will do my people well. And so to sit here today and hear some of the questions being raised just to ask questions, just for argument's sake, it astounds me. But this government of the St. Lucia Labour Party truly cares. And this is why not only are we doing barrel concessions at this present moment, but we are ensuring that the safety and security of the people of Grosley are given way more consideration than was ever given over the last 5 years. And this is why in this government, under the Minister of Home Affairs, we are currently ensuring that the Grosley police station is being built for our people. So this is not a government who gives in one hand, takes in one hand and gives to the next. This is a government that has showed they truly care. And they truly care about the everyday issues of our people, including ensuring those barrel concessions. This is a government that every single walk of the way, every single conversation, the end result is about putting people first. And so today, we're not only seeing the barrel concessions being extended for our people, but we're seeing a government that is ensuring that there is a housing repair program for all the people in St. Lucia. Not for some, not only in the constituencies of the St. Lucia Labour Party, but all. So those people who have houses leaking, we are dealing with that while we are giving barrel concessions. And so, for the young people in St. Lucia, who on July 26 understood that you don't vote for a government because they can be nice on Facebook and dance on Facebook and on Flubbo Friday. They've decided that they're going to put their trust in a government that truly cares about people. And so the fluff and the bluff that happened for over 5 years, we will not be deceived. They can see clearly that this government truly cares about them. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that from all indications, from all conversations, that this government is on the right track. This government, despite going through the worst economic times in this nation's history, has decided that no matter what, we are going to put people first. And so vouchers were given all throughout St. Lucia, every constituency, just to ensure that people know that they are the ones being put first and that their lives truly matter. And so today, Mr. Speaker, I have absolutely no issues or reservations with endorsing and truly being backed by this government. And I have every single confidence that we'll continue to put the people first and that they will ensure that they continue to put their trust in this current government. I thank you.
Member for Dennery North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, like my colleague from Grosley, it was not my intention to speak on the motion that is before the House at the moment. But after having listened to the members opposite and even gaining inspiration from members on this side of the House, I feel obligated this morning to add my voice to the debate. But I must admit, Mr. Speaker, that I'm a bit conflicted, confused even, in terms of what posture I will assume in this Parliament, considering the current composition of the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, for 5 years on the opposition benches, I came into this chamber to be accused of all kinds of things. I was the subject, along with 5 other parliamentarians, of much ridicule, Mr. Speaker. And the treatment that we received at the hands of the then government, Mr. Speaker, is something all of us want to forget. And so, upon assuming office as a minister once again, one would have felt the urge to come into government and treat the opposition in much the same way that they treated us. But Mr. Speaker, who I am today politically is in part, who I am today, Mr. Speaker, has been fashioned and shaped by having served under 2 prime ministers who brought humility and compassion to governance like no other has done in this country. Mr. Speaker, I recall serving in the cabinet of 2011 to 2016.
And the then Prime Minister was the subject of much abuse, ridicule, being vilified every day on television and radio by some known characters in the society. And coming in as a Green politician, it bothered me. Why an individual who was subjected to so much criticism, Mr. Speaker, can summon the courage and espouse the humility that would cause him to interact and interface with everybody, irrespective of how disrespectful and how much they vilified him. And he said to us at the time that when you are the government not just for the people who supported your party, but you are the government for the entire populace. Mr. Speaker, in the elections of 2016, I was confined to the opposition benches. But the then leader of the opposition always reminded us that 4 years is not 40 years, and that our day would come. And so the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, in the majority, in 2021, voted the St. Lucia Labour Party into government. And there we were again in the cabinet chamber. And Mr. Speaker, we could have once again decided that we were going to do to the opposition precisely what they did to us. And I can recall the Prime Minister, with pen in hand, put down the pen on the table and said to us that we are not running a tea boutique, we are running a government. And therefore, we ought to treat every St. Lucian with respect and with dignity. And that is why today, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the fact that for 5 years in opposition, there were no engagements with the government. None whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. State resources were not placed at our disposal to do anything for our people in our constituencies. And today we could have assumed a similar posture and say to the member for Micoud South and Choiseul that they are not to benefit from state resources in much the same way they treated us. But the Prime Minister has made it a point that any time state resources are going to be distributed amongst parliamentarians, they will get their share, unlike how they treated us. So, Mr. Speaker, I was baffled when I heard the member for Choiseul this morning talk about a candidate whom the people had rejected, parading and posturing in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, the member's posture was that of a hypocrite, because he would know that when agencies under his ministerial watch went into Denry North to do work, Mr. Speaker, not for once did he consult me. When their candidate was moving in SLG vehicles with engineering assistance, and when their candidate was recruiting people for every program in this country, Mr. Speaker, I was sidelined. I was relegated to a mere bystander. But I can assure him, Mr. Speaker, that this is not the treatment he will get. But he cannot come here as a hypocrite today to make it seem as if all of a sudden he understands what it means to bring all St. Lucians together, to work together for the betterment of this country. And the member of Micoud South, Mr. Speaker, he wants to talk about inflation. He wants to counsel us on how to make decisions. This is the same man, Mr. Speaker, who spent 100 or calls under his watch in this country, $112 million spent on horses at a time when you will not repair the Larissa Health Center, at a time when Windfresh was disappearing from under you. And today you want to come and stand here and modulate and regulate your voice to suggest that you want to counsel us. The people of St. Lucia have spoken. And so, Mr. Speaker, what they should have done was to stand here and lend support to the motion that would grant an extension for the period that people can go and get the barrels. Mr. Speaker, this has a lot of significance for the people of Denry North. Since the transitioning of our economy from agriculture, when banana was the mainstay, to tourism, Mr. Speaker, a lot of families were displaced in Denry North. And Mr. Speaker, 2 decades after, we are still transitioning. And so there is a heavy reliance on remittances in that particular constituency. And you have to see the lines at Western Union. You have to see the lines at MoneyGram. You have to ask yourself how many barrels come into this constituency on an annual basis, because that is how they can get by. So when the Prime Minister comes here today and he says that he's going to grant an extension by a further 2 months, Mr. Speaker, that ought to get the support of every member in this chamber if you really are concerned about the plight of ordinary people in this country. But do not see this as an opportunity to come and spew your découché politics. That is what you served. And everybody in here has been chided by this Prime Minister that whatever program you roll out in your ministries or agencies under your watch, you have to treat the opposition with dignity and respect and give them their fair share. You're supposed to applaud that, but not come here this morning and don't come here this morning and complain and make it seem as if all of a sudden you have found your bearings as far as the politics is concerned. No. And Mr. Speaker, he spoke about victimization and contracts being taken away from people in his constituency. Mr. Speaker, kile mwen sa di sa Creole. Because when you took 17 moun ki si akopan, na di Creole. Because tout moun ka akopan. Took 17, but 16, you can akopan bien. Mr. Speaker, the school transportation program, of which members opposite and their surrogates are making noise, Mr. Speaker. I entered the political arena for the first time in 2011. Upon entering the electoral process, I was voted to be the parliamentary rep for Denry North. The school transportation program ko moun ka chaye mamay l'école, moi jwen sa en place à Denry North. Ces drivers qui étaient dans le programme, c'est des gens qui ont supporté le gouvernement Flambeau. Mr. Speaker, I found them servicing the different school routes. I allowed them to continue, every single one of them, with the exception of two. One, he was transporting school children in an SUV, TX plate, all the way from Larissus, Denry, to the Beaufort Comprehensive Secondary School. The other, for his own stupidity, he was not reinstated. But every single one of the other drivers, United Workers' Party supporters, non-operatives, they had to retain their contracts. And you know why, Mr. Speaker? These are the same individuals who had to go to Castries at the end of the month to service loans. Those were men who wanted to extend and embark on home improvement projects. These are men who wanted to have a savings, Mr. Speaker, so that if there's an emergency with their families, Mr. Speaker, they would have something to fall back on. That is why I allowed them. And some persons refer to me as being soft. I was not soft, because I was in the company of people who brought compassion to public life. That is why I kept them. In 2016, Mr. Speaker, they came into government, the United Workers' Party, and they fired every single bus driver in Denry North whom they perceived or knew was a supporter of the St. Lucia Labour Party. And today, Mr. Speaker, the member for Schultz-Zell, no shame whatsoever, Mr. Speaker, will come here and talk about victimization and how contracts are taken away from his people. Mr. Speaker, where was the member for Schultz-Zell? It is convenient today. But I will guarantee him one thing for you, Mr. Speaker, that what they put us through, the six of us in opposition, we will not do that to you. Because we understand that there are people in Schultz-Zell who have needs. We understand there are people in Schultz-Zell who need the compassion of this government, Mr. Speaker, to get by on a daily basis. We will never do to them what they did to us.
Member for Schultz-Zell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite, Mr. Speaker, his statement seems to be misleading.
What is the point of order that you're raising?
Well, he's misleading. He's misleading the public, Mr.
What did
Speaker.
he mislead on?
Because he's giving the impression, Mr. Speaker, that I spoken untruth when I said that the people contracts were not terminated and that he's talking about it's going to be treating people different. Mr. Speaker, to the point where people who have been given contracts to carry school children
Member for Schultz-Zell,
Mr. Speaker.
Member Schultz-Zell, what I heard the member saying is that he's expressing surprise.
Exactly.
But he never insinuated that.
He's speaking that he's indicating to St. Lucia that I am giving a false information that my people were not fired.
No. I certainly did not get that impression. I got the impression you're saying that he's surprised that you would say something like that when the administration you served did exactly what you're complaining of. That's the thrust of his contribution.
And Mr. Speaker, if the school bus situation is not sufficient to illustrate the point, let us talk about the home caregivers. When the United Workers' Party came into government in 2016, they found there was a very successful home care program being rolled out in this country, Mr. Speaker. What did they do? Vernette in Grand Ravine for 5 years, she was asked to stay home. You know why? Because she was a supporter of the Labour Party. Miss Brim in Lapel in Denry North was asked to stay home. And what was her sin, Mr. Speaker? She was a supporter of the Labour Party. Helen in Olio was asked to stay home for 5 years. What was her transgression? She was a supporter of the St. Lucia Labour Party. Vaz, Joseph Kelly, a grave digger who buries people, Mr. Speaker. He buries the dead. That is how he earns his daily bread. He was fired for 5 years. They didn't want to see him because his party was not in power. And you want to come here and complain about school transportation contracts? But you can take comfort in knowing that we will not do to you, for you, Mr. Speaker, what you all did to the 6 of us. Mr. Speaker, this government under this Prime Minister brings compassion and humility to governance. We represent the interests of the poor. We were not the ones who denied children devices or spent money whilst money was being spent on horses. In this country, under their watch, $112 million spent on horses, and St. Lucians could not get basic infrastructure. St. Lucians could not get basic programs rolled out.
Member for Miku, what's your point of order?
On a point of clarification, Mr. Speaker, I've let him get away with it the first time, but I have to say, if he's going to make the suggestion that the government spent $110 million on horses.
Mr. Speaker, I never said the government spent. I said during his time, $112 million.
Member for Miku North, member for Denry North, please proceed.
So am I to understand I'm just on a point. Remember, it's a point of clarification. So the member is saying that the money was not spent by the government. Is that what he's saying?
The member never stated what you stated.
Mr. Speaker, I never said. I said, I'm going to repeat what I said. Monique Ossa, a pays cette liste, Mr. Speaker. Patota, gouvernement flaboté office. Plus qu'il y a $112 millions, t'as payé dépenser en l'air ça fait chouval. C'est ça, moi. Mr. Speaker, I support this motion. I believe this is a motion that is in keeping with the mantra that we took to the people. Putting people first. And there are a lot of St. Lucians, Mr. Speaker, who may not see merit in a motion as simple as this. But I know that in the constituency that I represent, the people who have gone to the polls on 3 different occasions to repose their confidence in me, Mr. Speaker, that in that community, there are a lot of families who will be better off as a result of a motion as simple as this. And so, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion, and I support the Prime Minister in taking it to the Parliament for the betterment and well-being of the people of this country. I thank you.
The member for Babonneau.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my voice to the bill presented by the motion presented by Honorable Philip J. Pierre.
Member for Babonneau, you are not to refer to members by name.
The Prime Minister.
When we name members, they go before the Privileges Committee.
Right. On the Honorable Prime Minister, in support of the bill, the motion on the need to extend the time for persons to receive barrel concessions. I say the word barrel that is in sync with Babolo. Barrels for Babolo. Let me take leave briefly, Mr. Speaker, to express my condolences to a 107-year-old resident of Babolo from my community of Plateau, who is being buried today. It is unfortunate that I am not present to be at the funeral. So I express condolences to the families, the Bunadin family in Plateau. This lady indicated that she wanted to live 112 years. But when she was about 100, but she got 7 added to her 100. And she indicated that she was a child when we had the last pandemic, the global pandemic. And she actually lived to see 2 of these distressful times in our history. I say so, Mr. Speaker, to support the bill, the motion on the need to extend the time for persons to receive burial. Because it's important that truth be told. And I want to support the side of truth. I have sat in this cabinet for almost a little more than 6 months. And when I hear the discussions in this cabinet and the Prime Minister and our cabinet colleagues, I call it a giving cabinet. Always giving, incentives. And today, I thought it was only in cabinet, but now we are in the House, still giving. This is a giving government. We have a Prime Minister who is simple, humble, caring, and giving. And this incentive with the barrels will go a long way for single mothers and those who are unemployed. We are putting the people first. And any government that puts people first will, 1, provide them with food, 2, give them housing, 3, ensure they are healthy, provide them with education and employment for them to become sustainable. Babolo is on its way so that we can become sustainable. And agriculture is what we need for food security, and we have started. And we have had our second attempt at the food market. The second one was more successful. I applaud the Babolo people. I saw transports on the routes in Babolo loaded with people going to work. I smile and I say, Labour, the Labour government is back on track, putting the people first. I am still amazed at the number of persons we approach for employment in Babolo, and maybe we will extend that to our other constituencies, where they are turning down work at $120 to $150 a day.
Member for Babolo, I mean,
yes.
There is before you a motion, and you haven't addressed that motion as yet.
Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is that the barrels that we have coming in, which will go up to March, will certainly support the supply of food and the necessities of the people. That is actually contributing to what the government has started doing. And that is to provide livelihoods for our people. And I was saying these, Mr. Speaker, in that context. And I need to say that we expect the entire House, opposition and government, to support this bill in the interest of our people, to continue to help them survive this extreme time in the times of COVID, where we have given out hampers, vouchers, Christmas stimulus packages, and the people in Bamono are saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to the Prime Minister, thank you to the government for ensuring that they have food on the table, proper clothing. Whatever they will collect in those barrels will go a long way in their own survival. With this, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister and the government for putting the people first. I thank you.
The member for Castries North.
Mr. Speaker, I came this morning with absolutely no intention to speak on this particular motion. But I feel compelled that I should at least make a contribution towards the debate because of the nature, the intention, and of course, the mission of this government. You know, when I reflect on where we are today, the way things went leading up to the 26th of July, 2021, today I would have been on the opposition bench. Had I been on the opposition bench today, I would have stood here and commended the Prime Minister and the government on what I believe is a fine gesture in the name of the people of this country. And I'm saying this not only because I am on this side of the House in government, but I've done it even when I was in opposition. When the government came with an instrument, with a motion or a bill that I felt was in the interest of the people, I stood up and commended them. But you know, I believe I have the most panoramic view of this parliament. The most panoramic view of this parliament. I heard the leader of the opposition say, action speaks louder than words. I believe I stand here and have that panoramic view. Because not only in words but in deeds. Mr. Speaker, I sat in the cabinet of the last government. I sit in the cabinet of this government. And I can give you stories, Mr. Speaker, of some of my own experiences of the manner in which people were treated only because they didn't carry a yellow cloth around them. Only because they didn't carry a yellow cloth around them. I now sit in a government, Mr. Speaker, where scholarships come to the cabinet and nobody says, I'm not supporting this because this person does not support the government. It comes to the cabinet and on merit the cabinet approves it. Mr. Speaker, this government, based on my experience, would agree on the distribution of vouchers. No discrimination whatsoever. I sat in the then cabinet 2 months before election in COVID, during the COVID pandemic, vouchers issued and the opposition denied vouchers. I can tell you about it. I experienced it. I can tell you. I experienced it. Mr. Speaker, and I know the member for Dennery South, Dennery North isn't there. You know, when I got into office in 2016, every Friday, there were people coming to the ministry looking for a little job to do, looking for a little contract. And I took a decision, Mr. Speaker, to try and help those people one way or the other by collecting the names and then to take a decision. And I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, to show you the significance of this decision of extending the barrel concession to the ordinary man, to the poor people. Because those persons who were coming in on a Friday and saying, Mr. Minister, I need a little contract. Mr. Minister, my wife's sick. Mr. Minister, I want to take care of my child. Mr. Minister, I need food on my table. I saw this as a need, without question as to political affiliation, religion, or otherwise, or creed, but as a commitment to the people to respond to them. And when Christmas came, I decided, let us distribute contracts to all these people. Let us give a limit, a ceiling, etc. And I did so, and without any reservation whatsoever, Mr. Speaker, I gave out the contracts. Christmas. Well, in January, I was called to a special meeting and lynched because I had given persons contracts from the other side.
You were called to a meeting by who?
How do you mean by who? You can ask the member for Viewfort, Dennery North. We had a program of painting bridges. I gave some to the representative and some otherwise. I still gave otherwise. I gave the rep a few contracts, 2 contracts. And I gave the others, the majority, in keeping with the philosophy.
And you were called to a meeting for that?
And I was called and chastised.
You never told me that.
Chastised for having given contracts to paint bridges. Now I've said these things, Mr. Speaker, and there are numerous other occasions. I have not even documented them. Numerous other occasions. I told you it's a library, I have not a book. It's a library, not a book. You know? So those things happen, Mr. Speaker. And when we speak about the caregivers program, when we speak about the caregivers program, Mr. Speaker, I remembered very well when they come here pretending that they are saints and they know everything and they can advise the government of what to do. During the time the caregivers program, Mr. Speaker, I recall the discussion was taking place in terms of replacing the people who were working under the caregivers program, Mr. Speaker. I recall I traveled just around the time. They said, let us do some kind of audit of the program. By the time I came back, a decision was made to which I asked the question. But what is the basis upon which you're taking this decision to fire the people because you claim that they're 99% SLP? What is the basis for a program like this? What is the basis? So when you speak about victimizing people, when you speak about pulling programs from people, do not talk. Do not talk, because you are the culprit. Come here and let us discuss the matter before us. The matter before us, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the government has moved a motion out of its conscience that having granted the barrel concession, There is a need to extend it because many people either did not receive their barrels on time or have been delayed in the process of shipping. That's it. Leave the issue of victimization out of the way because you're a victimizer too. Leave it out. And Mr. Speaker, you know, I contested the election as an independent. My theme was people and country. The Labour Party, which I have become part of, the government campaigned on putting people first. And on every single step of the way, this government has demonstrated that they stand for the people and they'll fight for the people of this country. That's all you can do, laugh today. That's not your damn business. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I withdraw the statement. I withdraw the statement, Mr. Speaker. That's not your business. The business you have to deal with are the people who are in your party planning to take you out sooner than later. That is your business. Deal with it. Deal with that business. Deal with it. The hypocrisy will come back to haunt you. So, Mr. Speaker, this government, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of putting people first, and on the principle of people and country, has proven that they are committed to the people. And the Minister for Education has indicated to you. He spoke to you, he mentioned the many programs, facility fees, CXC fees, soon you'll hear about the laptops and computers, and other programs for the children of this country without reservation. End of story. Okay? We are now negotiating with Flow and Digicel. We have brought in Digicel now, and Flow has agreed to provide a bundle for underprivileged families to allow them to access the internet. And first and foremost, they said 5 megabits, and we're able to convince them to move from 5 to 10. And I believe by the time I'm finished with them, they'll move from 10 to 20. Digicel has come, and Digicel said, we would like to participate in this, to be able to provide this sort of relief to the poor people and the dispossessed, the children of this country. And we are concluding negotiations with them. Mr. Speaker, we have also gone, I wrote to Lucia and said to Lucia, we need to do something for the poor people. And Lucia, after much discussion, hesitation as to whether they should proceed one way or the other, finally came and said, we will offer the government $450,000, and the commitment they asked is to ensure that it doesn't go to what not what they think it should go, but what we would like it to go to. So whether it's electricity, whether it's for food, for shelter, whatever the case may be. So next week, we'll be receiving $150,000 as the first payment, and that the cabinet has agreed to establish a social investment fund for the people of this country, to which this money will go into. We are also, and that fund will be established at the SSDF. So, that program will be established through the SSDF, and the method in which it will be utilized is to use what is called the SLNet system of targeting the persons who are in need of the program. $450,000 some loosely. Mr. Speaker, we are now preparing with the Minister for Commerce and myself to approach other businesses in the country to get a contribution to go into that fund for the children of this country. That's the kind of work this government is doing, Mr. Speaker. It is working for the people of this country. Social support, social stability, social transformation for the people of this country. And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister presents his budget, you will hear much more. You'll hear a lot more of what this government is doing for the people of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, if I were on the opposite side, I would keep my mouth shut and support the government and wait my turn when I believe I have something to talk about. But you have nothing to talk about. Why are you talking? And I say the people of this country need answers to what? Answers to what? You must tell them the things you did that you gave no explanations about. Tell them the things you did, you gave no explanation. Tell us how you spent the money of this country without authority. Tell us the things you did. And like I said, it is a library, not a book. Page by page, chapter by chapter, book by book will be opened and read in the coming years. 5 years to do it. So, Mr. Speaker, as I endorse this resolution, I believe it presents an opportunity not only for those persons in need in St. Lucia who've got family overseas to receive, but it gives an opportunity for St. Lucians overseas who want to pledge something to the people of this country. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, there's one young lady this afternoon who is probably very proud, very happy, and that's my daughter, who every year for summer, every year for Christmas, would use her own money based on her work, not my work, her work, doing 1 and 2 and 3 jobs, investing in food and hampers and school books and notebooks, etc., school paraphernalia to ship to St. Lucia to the children of Castries North. And not too long ago, 2 barrels of notebooks arrived from her for the children of Castries North. And just after Christmas, another 3 barrels came in for the school feeding program in the primary schools in Castries North, all done on her own. And I say this, Mr. Speaker, not because it's my daughter. It's because there are opportunities for other children, young people who have gone over, and families. I have a friend in Connecticut who has been sending clothes for children. So when we stand here and grandstand about inflation, where were you when inflation started? Where were you? You're talking about a government of 6 months not doing anything for inflation. You were there for 2 years when the inflation started. We saw the inflation, Mr. Speaker, even after the VAT was reduced from 15% to 12.5%. Where was your voice? Where was your voice? We saw supermarket prices rising. Where was your voice? Where was your action that speaks louder than words? Where was it? Tell me where it was. Okay? And you knew the people who were involved, because under your watch, you allowed them to monopolize the supermarket system in this country. And you did nothing. Nothing. And today, you come in with this cheap shot about, it is not about the barrels, it's about the food chain, it's about rising prices, rising costs of shipping. All of us know that. All of us know that. Where's the plan? You'll get the plan, don't worry. You'll get the plan. You'll get the plan too. You got one part of the pan on the 26th of July. You'll get the other part of the pan when the time comes. You think pan playing? So, Mr. Speaker, I am speaking, Mr. Speaker, in that manner because I cannot believe that a gentleman who I served with, he was the Prime Minister, and under your watch you saw the rising cost of living, prices in the supermarket. You did nothing, not even to expand the basket of goods. Huh? And now you're asking, where's the plan? My friend, you'll get so much plan and pan, you wonder what you did in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, you don't have to hope. The people of this country, let me say something, Mr. Speaker. The people of this country knew exactly what they're doing. They said enough is enough. Enough bluff. Enough talk. Enough, according to the flashing mirrors. That's the thing I'm looking for. That's the one I'm looking for, flashing mirrors. Enough flashing mirrors. Time for action. Time for action, and you did it on the 26th. And it's a good thing you dated the election on the 26th. Had you gone 2 weeks later, you would not have been here. And you would not have been here. Neither of y'all would have been here. Because you all would be wiped out, clean sweep. If you believe in Mia's victory, you would have seen it this time. But Mr. Speaker, I want to endorse this resolution. I want to commend the Prime Minister. And I must say one thing. This Prime Minister, and listen, I have the moral authority to say what I'm saying here. You know why? As I said, I have a panoramic view of government. I was there and I'm here now. This Prime Minister is a Prime Minister of compassion. This Prime Minister is a Prime Minister of his word. This Prime Minister is the Prime Minister of humility. This Prime Minister is a Prime Minister of conviction. And notwithstanding that this Prime Minister may not stand up and shout like I can shout, or you can bluff, this Prime Minister is a man, when he gives you his word, you can take it and go to the bank with it. I thank you.
Prime Minister.
Israel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to wind up that debate, I think of a Bible verse, Lamentations 3:47. Who can speak and have it happen if the Lord has not decreed it? Mr. Speaker, I sat and I heard members on the opposite side. And I said to myself, what a difference 6 months make. What a difference 6 months makes, Mr. Speaker. It was this member from Miku South, when he was in this chair, sat back and laughed at us, sat back and called us, he ridiculed us, he and his friend, one of them was sitting down there. He said nothing. We'll make you cry. He said nothing. They allowed another one who sat there to attack me personally for 46 minutes. He laughed at that, Mr. Speaker. He was the one who stood there when the member for Castries South was under pressure. He put the entire state apparatus against the member for Castries South. And I saw yesterday a bill that he paid lawyers $13,300 to begin criminal proceedings against the member for Castries South. That's the same member for Miku South who paid lawyers over $1.5 million in cases to fight against people who who were against him, Mr. Speaker. That's the same man who today, up to today, owes $490,000 to people like Lex
Caribbean.
Amicus. That's the same man who sits here, Mr. Speaker, and speaks about money and victimization, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I see the member from Microsoft talking about victimization. We have not fired one ambassador. We allowed all the ambassadors to serve their term and then the ease of their term. But you had to pay. You caused, not you, because it's not your money. The people of St. Lucia have had to pay ambassadors that you fired, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want to mention people's names. No, you fired several ambassadors, Mr. Speaker. I will not mention their names. And apart from that, you caused legal fees to go to the Privy Council because you want to victimize an ambassador. And you come and speak about victimization, Mr. Speaker. You come and speak about victimization. I do not want to go down that track. I don't want to go on that track, Mr. Speaker, and I've kept my silence. I've listened to the vilification of my name. I've listened to you and your courts say all kinds of things about me. You all have questioned my social graces. You have questioned my color. You have questioned all kinds of things, and you said nothing about it. You and your father sat in a radio station and heard one of your supporters question the color of my skin. You said nothing. You said nothing, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, you come here and you play because the people rejected you. You want to put a facade about you care about people. Let's talk about inflation. But I studied economics. Let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about inflation. If you want to have a lecture, let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about inflation. Inflation. The inflation that we experience in St. Lucia is imported inflation. Most of the goods that we pay for, Mr. Speaker, they are imported. So what has happened? Because of issues with the supply chain, because of issues of COVID, the prices of these goods have gone up from the source market. They've gone up from the source market, which is England or the US, where it's gone from there. So when it comes here, it comes already with an inflated price that we can do nothing about it. What can we do here? Two things we can do. We can reduce the duties or we can eliminate the VAT. If we do that, there's going to be a loss in revenue, which we have to check to see whether we can sustain it, because the revenue that we make, that's what is used to pay services in St. Lucia. So when you come and you pretend that you give a lecture on inflation, and you try to tie inflation to barrels, Mr. Speaker, the fact is, the goods in the barrel already arrive here with an inflated cost. But the only reason why the total cost plus the import duty is not paid by the consumer, because we've removed the import duty and the VAT. Very simple. Very simple. So at a national level, if we have to do anything about it, we have to take a decision whether we can cause a loss in revenue by reducing the import duty or reducing the VAT on these imported goods. That's the simplest question for solution for inflation. But when I went to an interview and I said to people, for their food security, something we can control, which is the planting of bananas, they could consume more and reduce the food import bill and hence cause a curb on the inflated price of food. You and your party decided you would ridicule me. That is why the people of St. Lucia put you where you are. Because they understood that the talk and the nice words was but fluff and bluff. And and as you've opened that door about policies, I'm waiting for you on the other bills, particularly the Public Finance Management Act. I'm waiting for you on that. I'm waiting. We are waiting for you because, Mr. Speaker, we are going to say to you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to get back to you on on the points that you made. You speak about victimization. When I became the Minister of Finance, I instructed the people in the Ministry of Finance, because of the ethos of putting people first, that when we paid civil servants salaries, we had to ensure that at the same time the transfers to the popular solution happened together with the salaries. Because we understood that these people, and every day in the discussions, I say to them, these people only have $250 to live on. Let us see what we can do for them, Mr. Speaker. You talk about pulling people first, but the question is, the issue that we have is because of politics. You added 1,500 names to this list of people who, some of them did not deserve it, and now we have issues to pay because you're playing your politics and you added 1,500 people to that list, Mr. Speaker. Just before elections. 1,500 you added just to play politics, Mr. Speaker. You come and you talk about victimization. I was a member of Parliament for Cashews East. I am. From 1997, Mr. Speaker. Any time the United Workers' Party was in power, they did nothing for Cashews East. Absolutely nothing. What they did is they strengthened the opponent, the person who ran against Mr. Speaker. They even put one for office next to my home. And God help me, I live to see the day when he left with a chair on his head. They created a whole philosophy against one, with one against me, call it a doctrine. They strengthened her. They gave her resources. I recall during hurricane, after the hurricane, or even Hurricane S, Mr. Speaker, I remember asking, what is happening to the people in Cashews East? 6 of us. They laughed at us. And during the same time, my opponent was spreading joy in the constituency, Mr. Speaker, at the same time. I remember that. I remember the member for Denby North saying he hasn't got one CDP project. And you know what was the retort? You lied. And you said to the people that the Taiwanese gave us $1 million and we did not take it. That never happened. That never happened, Mr. Speaker. And today, you come to this honorable house, and instead of asking the people of St. Lucia forgiveness for your transgressions, you want to posture and pretend that you have the welfare of the people of St. Lucia. I'm going to, Mr. Speaker, I can give stories of the 6 months since I'm in government, things that I have seen and have found in this government. Because pure recklessness, Mr. Speaker. Bad management, recklessness, uncaring. And you want to come and stand up here and posture and believe you can lecture people? Mr. Speaker, but the problem, Mr. Speaker, is that the people of St. Lucia saw the light, and the people of St. Lucia decided that enough was enough. But we're going to get to wastage. You know, don't rush us. We are going to get to wastage. And I told them, Mr. Speaker, you have to lead by example. You have to lead by example. All of us make mistakes. All of us probably say things that we have not the same, Mr. Speaker. But when someone who reached the highest office in the land can accuse somebody else of going to murder someone, and when given the opportunity to apologize, you say you stand by it. When the Commissioner of Police is on record as saying that there was no firearm involved. No, that is the mentality. That is the mentality of, it's a state of mind that makes, thank you. that makes you believe that you can do whatever you want. You have an ordained right. Because you say things I said that are obviously not true. And the same people were the ones saying that somebody who is in a high office now had taken the firearm from the person involved and brought it to me. Same person. But less than a year later, somebody who was in the highest office of the land goes on public television and public radio and accuse someone of having an intention to murder. And Mr. Speaker, it's the brazenness and the arrogance. After the guy lost his son, Mr. Speaker, after the guy lost his son, a doctor, not yet 25 years, no sympathy, no empathy. You understand? What you want to do is, because you believe you have a God-given right to run St. Lucia, you believe you have a God-given right, you believe that because of who you are, people like me should not be where I am.
That's the problem.
You believe that, Mr. Speaker. You believe that people like me should not be where I am. But I'm going to say to you, Mr. Speaker, I am here because the Almighty has decreed that I should be here, Mr. Speaker. And the people, because against all odds, you told everybody in the world, I could never win. You said I stammered. You told everybody in the world I could never win. You were boasting till I met one of your friends and he said, I called him. He said everything was okay, but obviously it was not. Because you were boasting all over. Could never win. You were making plans. You went to a CDB meeting and they said to you in October, is that October? I'll be here in October. Because you never thought that the people of St. Lucia will have the wisdom to understand that your time had ended. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask members, I thank you for supporting the VAT amendments. I thank you very much. And I would have hoped that the members opposite would not have opened the doors that they opened. I would have hoped that they would have come and supported the bill. I would have hoped that, Mr. Speaker. But they opened these doors. And my father used to say to me, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones, Mr. Speaker. And when you believe, and if you believe that this government will be cowed and put into submission by going on by every day libeling, slandering, lying all over on a radio station to frighten us, Mr. Speaker, to frighten us. We shall not be moved. We shall not be frightened. And we shall never be made to submit to people who believe that the sons and daughters, look around you. Look around you. The people in this honorable house, all of them, they are children of policemen, teachers, unemployed vendors, farmers, fishermen, storekeepers, laborers. These are the men and women who the people have entrusted the country in. And some people believe that we should not be here because of who we are. And that is that is the fight. And when I speak to young people, when I see some people support certain things, I feel sorry for them. And I remember George Odlum when he said, regardless of their plight, the little victims march. Mr. Speaker, this change has just begun. And this government will work. We will work together. And we ask all men and women of goodwill to join us in this struggle, including a member for Choiseul. Join us.
because we are more like you. We stand for more of what you stand for. And you are more like us. We stand for people. We stand for people. We stand for empowerment. And we stand for equality. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Be it resolved that Parliament, by affirmative resolution, do approve the draft value-added tax amendment of Schedule 3 order, which amends Schedule 3 of the Act to exempt imports of personal items, food, clothing, toys, and other household consumables contained in barrels for the period commencing from the first day of February 2022 and terminating on the 31st day of March 2022. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move a motion at this House and suspended until 2:45.
The question is that this House do stand suspended until 2:45 p.m. And now put the question. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. House suspended until 2:45 p.m.
All right.
And the House has suspended for the next hour as the members go to the lunch break. For today's first sitting of the House of Assembly, it has been a lengthy morning, an intense morning in some instances. We did hear statements from the ministers, the Minister for Commerce, Honorable Emma Hippolyte, a statement by Honorable Alfred Prosper, the Minister for Agriculture, Minister for Health, Honorable Moses Shabatis, as well as the Minister of Housing, Honorable Richard Frederick. The House did approve for the amendment to the value-added tax VAT, Schedule Order 3, which now makes provision for the extension of the barrel concessions, as we refer to it. And so the extension goes from the 1st of February to the 31st of March 2022, so that St. Lucians can continue to receive goods from overseas. And let's just remind you that the items in the barrels ought not to exceed $2,500, and there is a limit of 2 barrels for each household. And in the barrels if there are electronic items and items for commercial use, the VAT exemption is not going to apply. Also coming up following the lunch break for the House of Assembly, another amendment that is going to be of direct benefit to the people of St. Lucia is the Land and House Tax Amendment. And that amendment to the bill is going to grant further special exemptions, and amendment to grant special exemptions for tax payable on residential property for the year 2022. And so that again is giving some direct benefit to the people of St. Lucia. Further exemption on tax payable on residential property for the year 2022. That amendment to the bill is coming up in the afternoon session. Also coming up in the afternoon session, you would have heard mention of it by the Honorable Prime Minister in his summation. There is a Public Finance Management Amendment, and among other things, that amendment to the bill is going to allow for an amendment to the fiscal policy statement to allow the Minister of Finance to issue the fiscal policy statement no later than 3 months as opposed to 1 month at the end of the first 6 months of each financial year. There's also going to be an amendment to allow the Minister for Finance to lay the estimates of revenue and expenditure before the House of Assembly no later than 30 days after the commencement of each financial year as opposed to 30 days before the end of the financial year. Also coming up in the afternoon session, the International Business Companies Amendment, Insurance Amendment, and in that Insurance Amendment amendment to the bill, it is going to allow for a registered association an extension time to submit documents for a period permitted by the registrar in the case of a state of emergency or disaster. It's also going to allow a company an extension of time to submit its annual accounts for a period permitted by the registrar in the case of a state of emergency or disaster. So there is going to be an extensive session when the House of Assembly resumes in the next hour. Stay tuned for that live coverage. I'm Melissa Joseph on behalf of the entire team of the Government Information Service, NTN. See you in the next session.